Hello everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. I'm excited to be here, and if you guys are new here, my name is Candice Marie. It's nice to meet you, and if you guys are coming back to my channel, welcome back. I'm glad you guys are going to be here for this one because we have got a big old Hades moon that's going to be coming. So this is going to be my video on the Aquarius full moon, and I'm calling this the illumination of what has to die off. Now, on July the 29th, 2026, we're going to see this full moon in Aquarius at 6 degrees, and that means that it is reaching full illumination directly in opposition to the Sun and Jupiter in Leo. And that moon is sitting right on top of Pluto. So this is not your typical full moon, guys. Get prepared, get a helmet. This is a culmination point of a story that began months ago during the solar eclipse in Aquarius from February of this year. Now, it is the moment that we have been waiting for collectively. I feel like the collective unconscious is finally going to see what's coming into the light, and something needs to be released so that something bigger and brighter can take its place. This is also the last full moon that we're going to see before we go into August, where we're going to see eclipse season is going to begin. So I'm anticipating, even though this is not an eclipse, it sure as heck is going to feel like one. Now, by the end of this video, hopefully you guys are going to better understand why this full moon feels so charged, what it's asking of you personally, and how to work with it in a much more intentional way. And if you guys like this content where I talk a little bit about the history, what's kind of going on, obviously, around the world, the aspects and everything, please do like this video, consider hyping it, and share it on your socials. Don't forget to give me a big thumbs up if you like it, and subscribe to my channel. Click that bell button below so you can see more of my videos on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays. And do not forget to drop me a comment. I'd love to hear what big awareness or epiphany or shock and surprise happens for you under this full moon. Also, drop me your rising sign so that way I can hear what's going on. There's going to be a lot of chit chat and chatter about this one because, well, Sun is conjuncting Jupiter, so a lot of astrologers are going to tout this as the luckiest day of the year. And I think our perspective on whether or not some of the events that take place around this full moon and whether or not it's lucky, the jury's still out on that. But I will tell you guys that most likely something is going to be removed. So that way something positive, something can grow, something really good can come in. So it's going to feel a lot like a tower moment. Now let's talk a little bit about what a full moon means for us all collectively. Astrologically, this means that this is that peak in the lunar cycle, and it's that moment of maximum light and maximum tension. So the sun and the moon are going to be in direct 180 degrees opposition to each other, illuminating what was seated back in the new moon that we had a few weeks prior. So it's going to talk a lot about the new moon that we had in Cancer right around mid-July. And it basically means that this is a time of culmination, right? Revelation and release. So whatever has been kind of growing in the dark now suddenly becomes visible. Now with full moons, emotions run high because the moon rules our inner world, and when it's full, nothing stays hidden for very long. This particular moon, I think, is exceptionally powerful. I've actually been looking at this moon since last year for a number of reasons. I think the biggie is the fact that I'm calling this a Hades moon because it's going to be in conjunction to Pluto retrograde in Aquarius. And that means that Pluto is going to intensify everything that it touches. So the positive is that it's going to bring a lot of emotional depth. I think Aquarius moons are notorious for being a little bit more abstract. They're a little bit more matter of fact. They're an air sign, so this is also going to be something that's more about intellectual conversations, things revolving around collective change, and where we really all are just ready to take the trash out emotionally. But because Pluto is there, it also means that we're going to see that power dynamics are being discussed and that there is some major purge and kind of transformation that's coming up for all of us across the board. Now, likely what has been suppressed in groups, communities, or your own inner rebel may now start to kind of erupt or demand to be seen. But at the same time, the sun is coming into conjunction with Jupiter in Leo, and we're going to see that this is officially the, kind of right around the time that we're going to see the Jupiter Cazimi point, and everybody touts this as the luckiest day of the year, and obviously the sun is in Leo, so it's in its home sign. So it's really highlighting the kind of complexity of, out with the old, Pluto moon, the drama, the crisis, the emotional kind of catharsis that's taking place, and something that needs to end so we can bring some kind of gift, some kind of abundance, some kind of wisdom, personal joy, creativity all the way through. Now it's heart-centered, it's also about leadership, and the light is not just bright, it is generous and optimistic and likely larger than life. So this is creating a very rare polarity, right? We see this full moon every summer, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, where the Aquarius moon opposes the sun. But this is wild to see these two planets that are kind of like duking it out, with this standoff. Now, if you guys didn't catch my video that I put on Tuesday where I talked really in depth about the Jupiter-Pluto opposition, the truth is that this is the grand finale for what has been playing out really since about June of 2026, more specifically what's going to be playing out around July 20th. And then if you haven't figured out what that kind of, Jupiter-Pluto lesson is all about, we're definitely going to be feeling it by the time that we get to the full moon. I think that what's interesting is that this is very transformational, right? And it's also kind of saying emotional kind of material with the moon and Pluto is being directly illuminated by the biggest, most expansive expression of the sun meeting with Jupiter. So like I said, something old, something outdated, something that's no longer aligned must die off, must go into the dumpster. It must be removed. It must be purged. So that way new joy, authentic leadership, and creativity or love can be born. So it's a little bit of like the sweet and the salty at the same time, not crying because it ended, being happy because it happened. That kind of stuff is kind of what's going to be taking place collectively. And it's going to be a very, very big energy. Now we're seeing this happen. I'm here Central Time in Texas. You might have to adjust your time zone depending on where you are. On July 29th, 9:35 a.m. So that's Central Time. So it's around 7:35 a.m. Pacific, around 10:35 a.m. Eastern Time. And this full moon is basically happening at 6 degrees. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the degree theory and also the Sabian symbols and what they have to say. And 6 degrees in degree theory is an energy that is connected to Virgo. So this means that there's themes of discernment, precision, service, healing, the health industry, the service industry, and anything that's requiring some sense of refinement. And this is giving this full moon, I think, a very practical and kind of like exact flavor. And it's not enough to simply feel the emotional storm. I think we're being asked to look closely at what needs to be refined, what needs to be healed or released with clarity, but also with intention. So the Sabian symbol that we would actually be reading is going to be for 7 degrees of Aquarius. And I'm going to read that for you guys now to get a little bit more context in how this correlates. And 7 degrees of Aquarius says, a child born of an eggshell. So the theme is creative self-renewal. The symbol speaks to new beginnings. The image of a child born of an eggshell symbolizes rebirth or the process of creating the self anew. Everyone has within himself an infinite source of potential, and it is only at its potential when it's recognized and put to use in a present moment that an individual truly is reborn. The emphasis in this symbol is on self-realization, enlightenment, and regeneration. The practical implication of this degree is that limitations are never obstacles to achievement, but means to calling forth inherent potential for greater accomplishment. At its highest, the symbol represents creativity, unlimited resourcefulness, but watch for a tendency to give up too easily or believe that individuals are simply pawns in the circumstances. So today the accent is on rebirth and self-realization. You may discover a talent or aptitude you didn't know that you had, and it inspires you to focus on some new direction. Your greatest advantage lies in refusing to accept limitations and in viewing each day as a new beginning with its own special promise. Guard against failing to capitalize on your prior experiences in new situations. Avoid burning your bridges behind you when you decide to make changes or move on to something new. So stepping stones is creation, rebirth, regeneration, new beginnings, potential, self-realization, self-renewal, resourcefulness, individualism, infinite regression or progression. And I think that's so perfect because renewal, regeneration, rebirth obviously is that energy that's connected to Pluto. I also think that these aspects are pretty wild when you look at them, and we're going to break them down one by one because you guys know that the aspects are going to kind of determine how this full moon is going to play out. But before we even get there, I want to show you how this full moon was actually seeded. So let's go back in time and let's look at 6 months ago when we had the solar eclipse, which was in Aquarius. So you guys are gonna have to put on your thinking caps and think about what new things were seeded around mid-February of this year. So it was February 17th, 2026. Now this was the first eclipse that was gonna be a series of eclipses that were gonna play out in the axis of Leo and Aquarius. We're still waiting for the Leo eclipse that's gonna come on August 12th next month. But oftentimes with an eclipse, we don't actually see some of the effects until you get about 6 to sometimes 12 months down the road. So this is almost like the closing eclipse to what was seeded back in February. Now this was one hell of an eclipse, pun intended with Pluto, because obviously not only did it represent the incoming nodal change, which is about to happen here soon, but it was also talking about Aquarius themes. What was futuristic, what we don't see, what was about to change in terms of all of us with Aquarian kind of lessons. Power, the internet, communities, networking, things that deal with technology, science. And this particular eclipse was pretty rocky from what I remember, just due to the nature of the square to Uranus in Taurus. And it did represent this stress test that was going to be kind of coming up for everybody with resources, right? Uranus and Taurus is kind of the destabilizing effects, I think with, just finances kind of globally, global economies, things that are connected to banking systems, stuff that was also dealing with a lot of price surges that would potentially be coming in. So cost of food being erratic, major developments, obviously when it comes to cryptocurrencies or some changes revolving around kind of collective values. And those fixed signs, they don't like to change. So when you see an eclipse in a fixed sign and it's squaring another planet in a fixed sign, it represents this sense of like two sides that are unwilling to kind of bend. So it kind of told us, starting in February of this year, look, collectively everything is about to change in terms of, our value systems, our banks, our resources, our planet, right? Uranus and Taurus is a lot about the earth and things that are connected to some really erratic, I think, weather patterns, and obviously just, price surges and things like that. Uranus is connected to power. So this is also, I think, the kind of reckoning now that's coming up about who's in power, who has a say over what things cost, how we are collectively maybe pushing against the system and saying, hey, you know what, the stress test is not fun. We can't afford this. So this isn't our values. And it's been showing us where we all have to adapt. The only positive thing that I guess I could say that kind of came from this particular eclipse is that it was both sextiling Chiron in Aries. So a lot of people were seeking new communities. There was like a evaluation of our goals where we're all going collectively into the future. And we recognized that on a personal level, we had to heal things within ourselves, maybe alienation or feeling kind of isolated or lonely with Saturn and Neptune having been in conjunction. I think it was like, the conjunction took place just a mere days, or actually no, yeah, it was going to take place just a couple of days after this particular eclipse. So February was nuts, right? And we had Venus on the North Node then. So it was saying that we were all learning to heal, to kind of unify, to forgive, to practice, spiritual, I think, cleanliness. And obviously that was at an 8. So it was talking about a lot of things that we did not collectively, I think, want to kind of heal or look at. Anyway, so there was a lot going on, but this is what we were starting with. And now this is what we're working with as we get into the end of July in 2026. So let me move into that. All right, so we're back to that. And I want to break down all of the individual aspects so that way you guys have a better understanding of what's going on. because there's a lot of major aspects that makes this incredibly potent. Whenever I look at a full moon, I'm always going to look at if there are any planets that are conjuncting the moon or asteroids. And I'm also going to be keeping an eye on the ruler of that particular, full moon based off of its modern day rulership. So the full moon is being ruled by Uranus in Gemini. And if you notice, both the moon and Pluto and Juno are actually trining Uranus. So that makes me feel a little bit better about this. That particular trine basically means that both Pluto and Uranus are saying the same thing. They're of the same mindset. And trines are always going to be something that's more harmonious. And there is this sense of like electric support, right? Uranus is lightning bolt, bright ideas, plot twists. And as it's been going through Gemini, I think it's been having us all collectively learn more, read more, ask questions, communicate, share. And it's definitely lit up, I think, a lot of kind of social media where everybody's been talking about, well, a revolution, right? Aquarius, we got to do something. We got to work together. Now, what this has that the solar eclipse did not possess is a trine, okay, to the ruler. That one had a square to Uranus, and there's a lot of conflicts over values and what people believe, and we saw a lot of like left versus right type politics coming up. But this one is basically saying with the trine to Uranus that we all collectively, Aquarius, can now start basically being like, it's not necessarily about left or right. It's more about, hey, we're all in this kind of pressure cooker together and something needs to change. So it's forcing everybody to collectively have conversations, communicate, connect, and learn. And I do think that what Pluto is kind of transforming in the collective can now move forward with fresh, innovative ideas rather than just plain old destruction. So I guess that's a positive. We're also seeing in the background, and I've talked about this a lot, but the sextile to Neptune is that kind of personal awakening, like waking up from fever dreams. Is like Neptune retrograde where you wake up with a fever and it's like, oh my God, was that a dream? Like, is this real? And it does also form a, let's see, what's the other aspect? Yeah, so we've got the moon sextile Neptune. We've got Neptune that's sextiling Uranus. We've got Uranus that's sextiling Jupiter. And it's creating that basket formation. Now within the basket formation, or, Barbeau's basket, we talk a lot about how Neptune and Uranus are the stabilizers, and it can kind of reinforce and kind of bring support for this tension between Pluto and Jupiter, which is kind of brewing around the 20th of July. What I'll tell you guys is that because the full moon's conjunct Pluto, because it's a full moon, because we're also going to see the opposition to Jupiter, this is going to make it larger than life. Like, I'm not as optimistic that whatever kind of collective crisis that's happening is going to be as easy to manage, I guess I would say, due to the sextiles, because this is directly highlighting the opposition between the two. So beyond that, we've got the full moon conjunct Juno, okay? And this is the asteroid goddess that deals with marriage. It deals with unity, anything that's kind of connected to partnership. And we all know, mythologically speaking, Juno was actually married to Jupiter. She was called the good wife, and she represented collectively our values and the way that we look at marriage and what it means to partner. And in your own natal chart, Juno can talk a lot about maybe your future spouse or what you're seeking for in a committed relationship, or how you partner with people in general. So I take a step back and I go, whoa, everybody's going to have something to say about who we can and cannot partner with, what partnership means. I think there may be some stuff that comes up that talks about some really loud dissenting voices and people who have polar opposite, opinions about marriage and the ideas of marriage. And obviously, Jupiter is the husband, and Jupiter is in opposition to Juno. So that tells me that this particular full moon, for those who are married, may be highlighting where there is some tension in marriage and relationships or in partnerships in some way, and that there's friction that's going on between Sun, Jupiter, masculine kind of ideas, things that are associated with men being leaders or, being kind of worshipped, and really the patriarchy and also the matriarchy, and whether or not we are falling into one particular group within our relationships, kind of like gender roles, right? And it might be bringing up some discussions about things that are connected to marriage and whether or not there are decisions that are being made, and it can be in any country. I don't know where, but there might be discussions about, can we continue to allow certain people to marry? Are we going to allow international kind of unions and relationships? Are people seeking relationships with people from foreign lands? What are the rules revolving around that? And well, immigration, I think, is something that's going to come up. And it's going to be interesting to watch the polarity, but I have concerns about how we're just going to see a lot of like marital relationships that are going to be having conflict. So I just got to put that out there. It won't hit everybody that way, but we're going to see that collectively. And I also wonder if there's going to be like a return or a reevaluation of some countries making decisions about gay marriage, because Juno in Aquarius is about unconventional marriages or anything that, in traditional astrology, it would be considered unconventional. This day and age, it's rather normal. But I think there's going to be a lot of back and forth in regards to that and the traditional views of marriage and whether or not they need to be updated, or whether or not people are saying, hey, we need to reassess if this is something that we want to be doing collectively. And obviously it's going to create a major talking point about some of those topics. Now, on the other hand, and this is what's really interesting, is that many astrologers are going to come on YouTube and they're going to regurgitate the same things, and they're going to say to you, oh my God, July 29th, the sun is conjunct Jupiter and it's going to be the luckiest day of the year. And I would say maybe in some situations we would see that. Certainly got snaked last year. If you guys remember, sun came into conjunction with Jupiter in Cancer, and it was squaring off with Saturn and Neptune. So it certainly did not manifest as such. And maybe if this was not a full moon and Pluto wasn't opposing the Sun-Jupiter conjunction, I would say, yeah, it's a pretty good day, right? Because that, the sun, it's in its own sign. It does obviously have a trine to Neptune retrograde in Aries. So it could represent where a lot of people are waking up going, I choose joy, I'm choosing creativity, I'm choosing fun, I'm choosing romance, I'm going to be self-expressive, I'm going to be on my own like little stage where I'm going to be creating and sharing. But Leo represents the individual, right? As does Aries, but more so the comedian, Jupiter and the sun. We're going to watch comedians and whether or not there's going to be a lot of political kind of discourse that's coming from one. If there is going to potentially be a big scandal revolving around a leader of sorts, Sun and Jupiter could talk about a prime minister, a king, it could talk about a president, and anybody who is in positions of leadership and power, and whether or not there's going to be a lot of public outcry in speaking out against abuses of power. And this is where Aquarius is the crowd. I'm sure many of you guys who are watching this, you've basically been to a comedy show, or maybe you've been to a concert or something where somebody makes a comment. Maybe they make a political statement, maybe they make a joke, maybe they're trying to play a song, and it's just a bust, right? And that person is up there trying to do their best, working through, their kind of comedic performance, or they're playing the music that they're playing. And there's just this loud outcry that's coming from the crowd where they're like, boo, get off the stage, or they're just like, you suck, or they're throwing, tomatoes at the person performing, or, you have people who are speaking out in the crowd when you have like a leader or a CEO or a celebrity, that's on stage giving a statement. And there's that heckler or somebody in the crowd or somebody who tries to disrupt their moment of fame and says something that's just like what's on everybody's mind, right? So one of the things I think about is like, remember when Taylor Swift was going up to accept that, I think it was like that music award, and Kanye ran up there and he grabbed the microphone and he was like, Taylor, you did your thing, but Beyonce should have won. And everybody was like, oh my God, like, is this really happening? That's the kind of feeling that I'm getting like looking at this. So I don't know if it's going to be a celebrity. I don't know if it's going to be a comedian. I don't know if it's going to be a politician that's going to be on stage that's, pandering or saying whatever that they're saying, or that they're, holier than thou, Sun, Jupiter, and Leo. And then there's going to be some pretty significant backlash that's coming from the internet, that's coming from the crowd, or somebody who says something or does something to really steal the limelight and expose the truth and the reality and the public sentiment about how we feel about that person, right? Okay, so once again, going back to the Sun Jupiter, is this the luckiest day of the year? You know, I think that it's up for debate. I'll probably still do another video on this, but I have to talk about it because the video's got to come out this week. And I think what some people might see as a tragedy, or they might see as a very devastating moment, or a moment where there's going to be some kind of ending or, you know, tower moment, and they're going to go, this is the worst thing that could have happened, or oh my God, why is this falling apart, or why did this die off, or why did we separate, why did my job end, is reflecting on the Sun and Jupiter, which means because this is the best thing that could happen to you. All right, so good and bad is all relative. You guys have heard me say that before. And this is a full moon where some of us can very easily get caught up in a lot of the drama of what's going on politically, or what's going on with the crowd, or what's going on in the internet, and not catch why it is such a beautiful moment, or why it is such a good thing that something is getting exposed, or that something is coming out, and likely exposing people in positions of power. And Jupiter, you know, could represent, like I said, a comedian, but it could also represent a lawmaker. It could be a really prominent legal case. There could be some big decision that's kind of made that's somehow tied to Hollywood or entertainment. And yes, full moons are conclusions. So we could also see that there's, you know, somebody really prominent that passes away or dies. If you guys caught my video on Tuesday, I talked a lot about how, you know, Pluto in Aquarius is like the dinosaurs that don't want to give up the old ways. You know, the changing of the guards that's happening with Jupiter in opposition to Pluto, and that we're seeing all of the older kind of structures, I think, in society and in politics and anything that's connected to power around the world start to break down. So that way it's making space for new laws, new leadership, new freedom, new joy, new creativity. And if anything, I think the Sun conjunct Jupiter can teach us that having a sense of humor, being able to see the bright side, being able to make fun or make light of something can actually get us quite far in what can feel like some real trials that we're going to be going through, you know, around the time of the full moon. Now that Sun in Leo represents what? Personal growth, fame, joy, abundance, anything that deals with what makes life worth living, you know, why we kind of get out of bed in the morning. And that trine that we're seeing to Neptune means that it can also, for a lot of us, make us feel like we're ripping off, you know, we're ripping off like the eye mask and becoming aware of our natural talents, our joys, and like what it is that we need to do to encourage growth and optimism and also life. Now, obviously the Sun and Jupiter and Moon, as well as Pluto, are all coming into a square with Taurus. Now this is it's a little wide because Taurus is at 0 degrees. Obviously Pluto is within about a 4-degree orb. You know, the Moon's within a 6-degree orb. Jupiter and the Sun are within a 6-degree orb. But this creates what we call it's called a T-square. So it's a fixed T-square. Unless you're a Scorpio, then you're going to have a grand fixed cross. But this makes it even more interesting because Leo is the stock market. It's also about gambling or anything that's connected to speculation, while Aquarius is going to talk a lot about our money that we make, like gains, anything that's going to be coming from our work or our career. So people are going to want to party Sun and Jupiter when it's in, you know, Leo. And then there's going to be some people who are going to be like, oh my God, no, what's happening is like a tragedy. So it could bring up, I think, a major stress test to the financial system, which we already saw kind of baked into the solar eclipse from February of this year with a square to Uranus in Taurus. And this is telling me that it's going to show where there's issues with the bond markets, where there's going to be issues with hard assets. Also, it's going to possibly be bringing up shortages or issues connecting to food and anything that we buy or anything that we consume. Now, the other side of my brain is saying, yeah, if there is some kind of crisis-related event that transpires here, which it may, that some people are going to go, oh, well, you know, everything is like crashing, things are getting sold off. And they're going to go, what an opportunity this is to, you know, when there's blood in the streets, jump in and say, I feel good about this. Even though it doesn't look good now, it may potentially be something that is going to be reversed, or it's going to actually end up being very lucrative if I'm willing to be optimistic, if I'm willing to be patient down the road. Now, this is not financial advice. A lot of it's going to depend on what's going on in your natal chart. And if you want to know more about that information, you know, click the links below, head over to my website and book a reading. But I could see where some people are going to say, especially economically, this is a good thing, you know, that these prices are cooling off. I was just reading the other day, I was reading an article where they were talking about how Walmart and Target and some major grocers are all doing like a big blitz media campaign being like, lower prices, stuff is cheaper, you know, we're lowering our prices. And I'm like, like what's going on? And I started doing a little bit of research, come to find out that due to the nature of some of the cuts that they have been doing, you know, for people who are living on government support, and whether they're immigrants or if these are people who are, you know, not necessarily working, if these are people who are not contributing, because a lot of Leo is, okay, this is what I need. And Aquarius is like, yeah, but what are we putting into it? Now we're starting to see, yeah, there isn't as many food stamps out there, unfortunately, you know, and that could go one of two ways. If there are people who've been abusing the system, then people who are working hard, who are having a difficult time affording food and resources may now see some relief. But by the same token, you know, it might also mean that people who are, you know, used to being able to have that support and security are now facing Moon Pluto housing crisis issues, major family issues, family drama, as a result of some kind of financial pain. So once again, pays to know your astrology. It can go one of two ways when you're looking at the opposition, and a lot of it is going to be connected to your particular perspective. Do you guys want to deal with the pain now, right? And just get it out of the way and get it out in the open, or expose that thing that's a problem? Or do you want to allow it to fester and eventually kind of stunt your own personal growth or your own personal joy? And this is where I have to be honest, like, I know we're going to see a lot of people who are probably going to be in the comments. They're going to be kind of coming for me, coming for each other. But you will see that the nature of the opposition, especially in fixed signs, is it's this or it's that. It's left or it's right. It's black or it's right. Or it's black or it's white. And it basically makes me feel like if we get sucked into that mindset of it's this or that, we have already lost the plot. I'll probably put it in this video if I can put it in this video if I have some time. I reposted something that I saw on Twitter recently, and it was like a skeleton that was like hanging out, and he was like posted up on a window, and it said like, me waiting for everybody to figure out that it doesn't really matter who the president is. And I like laughed my ass off because I was like, yeah, I feel like everybody who's on one particular team, you know, that's cheering for that political party, and the other one that hates it and opposes it, you know, we're going to see it's like two in the same, right? And that a lot of the tension that's being generated right now is intentionally trying to stir up the masses to get us to argue and bicker and fight while they're pulling some major shenanigans kind of like in the background. Now, the positive is that Moon is going to sextile Neptune. So, you know, this brings more spiritual vision. This is compassion. It's about imagination, and the aspect can soften the energy of Pluto, and it adds this layer of like idealism and healing. So some of you guys might actually feel called to release old pain through forgiveness, be that forgiving yourself, forgiving other people. Maybe it's going to create a little bit of an uptick with creativity and also spiritual practices. And it's not too far off also from a sextile to Saturn in Aries, which is active. It's retrograde, and it is one of the traditional rulers of Aquarius. And Saturn brings structure. It's also about responsibility and like long-term consequences. So its presence here, I think, is kind of reminding us that if we want freedom, right, Aquarius, it requires personal discipline and new foundation, Saturn in Aries. We cannot just rebel, because that's going to be chaos. We actually have to have a vision. We have to build something. It needs to be sustainable. And from the ashes of what ultimately we release. I also think that just in terms of what we kind of seeded during the eclipses, this is probably going to be a really big turning point for a lot of people, because back in February, you know, we had the solar eclipse, but the North Node was not in Aquarius yet. So a lot of people were like, whoa, that came out of left field, and it was sudden and it was hard. But at this point in time, come the end of July, we're going to now have the North Node, which is going to be in Aquarius, and the South Node, which is going to be in Leo. So that means that the sun is picking up the energy of the South Node in Leo, which means we're trying to move away from ego. We are trying to reconnect with our own creative, you know, energies. Maybe we're trying to reconnect with joy. We're trying to have more fun. We're trying to release the sense of, well, what about me? How does this impact me? Or look at me, look at me. So we can start going, well, look at us, look at what we're building, look at what we're creating. And I think with like the Uranus connection to the North Node in Aquarius, and the fact that that eclipse was around 28 degrees, right? 27, 28 degrees. Now the North Node is there. So it's also showing us, hey, now it's time to actually collectively get the show on the road with what we knew we had to start 6 months ago. And if you haven't gotten into the flow of that, now you're going to kind of get it like right between the eyes. World predictions, I don't know. I mean, I think that once again, on the world stage, this full moon, I think it's likely to bring some very visible reckonings in areas that are connected to Aquarius. So technology, media, collective movements, systems of power. We could see that there could be internet issues, power issues. We could see that there could be some major things taking the internet by storm just due to the nature of the trine. And with that moon conjunct Pluto, we may see sudden exposures of power struggles within groups or maybe online communities and governments or large institutions, and old structures that have really relied on control or surveillance or emotional detachment could face public breakdowns or forced transformations. Now, maybe that trine to Uranus and Gemini suggests that the breakthroughs are in communication, technology, or unexpected alliances that help push these changes forward in innovative ways. And we could see rapid shifts in how information spreads or how communities are going to start to organize, particularly locally, not just online. And the sextile to Neptune in Aries adds a layer of idealism, spiritual awakening, collective compassion that may emerge alongside the intensity and like shock people awake. And perhaps through humanitarian efforts, artistic expressions, or new visions for the future that inspire people to kind of come together. Now, also in the background, I think with like Saturn being there, it's reminding us that real change will require discipline and structures. And so we're not just tearing things down, we're being asked to build something more responsible and more sustainable in its place. We've got Mars, which is in Gemini, and it is in a square with Venus in Virgo, both at 21. So this is going to test international relationships. It's a Sag degree. There may be some legal decisions that are being made by a large group. So I think like, ooh, is something going to go down with like the Supreme Court? Are they going to make a big decision that's going to be impacting the masses when it comes to home or where they're living? And Mars in Gemini, it fights with words, right? And it's also about debate and kind of going back and forth when it's at 21. And we do see a little bit of tension and friction that can kind of come up in relationships here. Archetypes for Gemini would be our siblings, our neighbors, what we're texting, what we're emailing, what we're saying, and the friction that we have with relationships with people at work, or what is or is not healthy discourse. Are we maybe being a little bit too forceful? Are we not being open-minded enough? And debates in regards to healthcare might be something that's coming up with Venus being in Virgo. The other aspect that I think is also worthy of mentioning is pretty much the fact that, we're going to continue to see, now that Mercury is direct at this point, it's moving forward, but there is still that kind of lingering Mercury-Saturn square that started in June, actually, where Mercury came into shadow and then it retrograded. And it talks about where like individuals, now that Saturn is retrograde, are not totally feeling heard, or they don't feel necessarily safe, right? Mercury retrograde in Cancer, or they're not satisfied with where they're living, or they're not satisfied with something about their family, or like their kind of like domestic, related things. And Mars is starting to pick up an energy of a trine to the North Node. And this means that people can organize, they can come together, they can party, they can have fun, they can network, as long as they are willing to take action. And it's not necessarily about physical action, it's about words. Are we reaching out to others? Are we connecting? Are we communicating? Are we finding ways to kind of stand up and instigate some of this change? Are we getting more involved with what's going on with our local communities? I would hope so. I don't know, but it definitely makes me feel like this archetypal theme with Jupiter in Leo representing the old guard, right? And the sun being there too. And it's established leaders, maybe it's lawmakers and figures who have kind of long held power and reshaped the rules of the game, versus that of Pluto and Aquarius, which wants a revolution. And it's like the collective kind of demand for systemic change and the dismantling of centralized power and the rise of new decentralized structures. What we're watching here is something that is not a surprise. This energy with Jupiter and Pluto really started that tension since it went into Leo at the end of June. And we're going to find that it's manifesting in real time in mid-July. But by the time we get to the full moon, many long-standing political figures, right, including congressmen, maybe senators, presidents, prime ministers, may suddenly be passing away or passing the torch, or potentially, stepping back. I think we've already seen this. Just recently we saw Lindsey Graham passed. We've got Mitch McConnell that's been, supposedly alive, although the jury's still out on that. Nobody really knows. And there's been a lot of debate online about whether or not these videos or these pictures that he's posting is actually really him. If you guys go on Twitter, you see people running, that photo of him sitting with his wife, in the hospital, all dressed in a dress shirt, and he's got a newspaper next to him, and people are running it through AI and asking it, like, does this look like it's been AI generated? And a lot of them are saying, yes, it does, which is crazy because he's holding a newspaper that was from the day that this was put out, right? And for those of you guys who are maybe younger and you're like, why would he be holding a newspaper? Back in the day, the only way to really prove that something was real is if you had that daily newspaper. If you're holding it up that day and you're taking a photo with it, it's kind of like the original timestamp, right? To prove like, yes, this is real, this was today. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around how is that possible? How could have AI integrated that so perfectly? Is it fake? I don't know. But I think that we're just watching what's about to be the old guard that has kind of held power for decades now begin to thin out, creating space for new leadership to emerge. So this full moon is really amplifying, I think, the collective call, maybe for term limits, maybe for generational turnover, because old systems, Pluto and Aquarius, can no longer sustain the same faces and also the same rules. And with Pluto retrograde, they're unwilling to give up that power to new leadership, Sun and Jupiter, to younger people, to people who are hungry. We know that power hungry, situations come up with, the Jupiter-Pluto opposition in itself. I also predict that we're going to see increased volatility of financial markets. Aquarius is going to be basically about anything connected to gains, while we've got Pluto, opposing the Sun and Jupiter. So for some people, it might be big losses, big gains. For other people, it could represent, like I said, jumping in when they're seeing that things are kind of going sideways. I have suspected for a little while, because this was seated under the solar eclipse that was square Uranus, that this may be when we start to see the AI bubble burst. Because Aquarius is technology. The moon conjunct Pluto is people are becoming very disillusioned about what new technologies they bought into, especially people who have been like, oh, I put, my retirement into this. I started moving into AI or, technological stocks. And that full moon could be the bust, where we're seeing that it's actually not going to be doing what people think it's going to do. And it's highlighting the opposition to the Sun and Jupiter. We may see some people getting out of AI and going into gold. Not a financial advisor. That's just my speculative kind of thought on this. And that now there's going to be more diverse conversations about, okay, Leo stuff, speculation, leadership, centralized power. What laws are being passed about this stuff? Who makes decisions about, what's going to be happening with Pluto? How much we pay for utilities? How much energy is going to these data centers? How much money is being kind of sent from Congress to war? And realistically, whether or not the people are actually feeling kind of represented. Watch for it, because you guys are going to see major exposures around manipulation. And that starts as soon as the Jupiter-Pluto opposition, takes place around the 20th. And that means we're probably going to see whistleblowers. We're going to see manipulations of, of markets, maybe financial crimes, gambling or money laundering schemes, maybe where there's really influential people or celebrities or sports stars that are involved, and abuse of power within institutions that could trigger some major sharp moments in the stock market or major economic systems. Now, I cannot understate this enough. When these old power structures are illuminated under this full moon, they then begin to crack. And markets will probably be reacting with volatility as confidence begins to shift. Now, geopolitically, this full moon is activating charts connected to long-standing power struggles as well. The charts that really get highlighted that I've looked at has been China and also Israel, because they carry very strong fixed, or Aquarius kind of Leo dynamics in their national charts. And we may actually experience heightened tension or significant developments around leadership, technology, and collective identity, and old versus new systems of power. Now, this full moon on July 29th is also putting a huge highlight on Vladimir Zelensky. So I guess the prime minister of Ukraine, but I don't know how that works because I don't believe that they've had elections in a while. But I think he's going to be in the spotlight because the full moon falls very close to his natal sun in Aquarius. So it's going to be close to his sun and Pluto. And it's going to be obviously, bringing this period of heightened pressure and transformation and visibility for him as Ukraine's leader. The opposition to Jupiter and Leo may obviously kind of amplify both support and criticism of his leadership and making his decisions and his public image more prominent on the world stage. So I do think he's going to make headlines because this theme of the lunation, it carries old power structures being challenged by collective and revolutionary forces. So this means that dynamics are already kind of relevant to what's going on in Ukraine and the ongoing kind of conflict that they have when it comes to international politics. So I think this will be a big moment of reckoning for him politically, and maybe sudden developments that kind of shift the momentum. And it may highlight his strengths, but it's also going to show the challenges of maintaining his long-term authority with all of the change that's going to be kind of going on in that country. Yes, I also think because Pluto represents crisis, it's crime, it's death, it's endings, it's renewal, I think we're going to see some major flare-ups around nuclear concerns. That's my real concern, especially from about mid-July all the way till about mid-August. And we're going to see a lot of military posturing and internal shifts as kind of this revolutionary energy of Pluto and Aquarius presses against some of the established structures. But overall, this moon, I think, is going to mark a kind of collective thunderstorm moment where long building tensions around power, technology, and group identity are now starting to kind of break wide open. Now, what's interesting is that there's a larger cycle here, and I guess in the honor, or I guess in the themes of Aquarius, because Aquarius is very future-oriented, where we're going in the future, what we're doing, something caught my eye, and it's the fact that this particular degree will actually eventually be a solar eclipse at 6 degrees of Aquarius. You're going to see this in the future. So not only is it the closing full moon to an eclipse that was seeded earlier this year, not only is it the portal or the gateway before we go into August's eclipses that we're going to have in Leo and in Pisces, but also because we're going to see in January of 2028, this will be a solar eclipse. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. It's almost like emotionally we're ready for the change, but then in a few years from now, then that change is going to come hard and fast, whether we like it or not. Now, this is going to be here on January 11th, 2028. And this is why I'm doing this video, is because I want to show you guys the power of astrology. If I have it my way, I'll still be on the internet in 2 years, I hope. And you guys can come back to this video, you can bookmark it, and you can be like, wow, Candace was saying this 2 years ago. Because the full moon is saying we're all becoming aware of the abuses of power, we're all collectively calling out for a revolution, we all want to see this change happen, we want freedom, we need freedom. If we do not rise to the occasion on this moment and choose to confront this head on, then we are going to have basically what's going to be a head-on collision. Oops, sorry guys, it's going to be here. Around January 26, 2028, okay? So we're in 2026, so it's going to be about, what, in a year and a half? We have 18 months before this comes in. And if you look at this, the North Node will be conjunct the moon, the sun and the moon will make the solar eclipse, and Pluto in Aquarius is there. This is the hard reset. So we can make the decision now to work with this, or we can wait until it comes hard and fast in about 2 years' time. And that solar eclipse will be conjunct the North Node, and you're going to see Mercury retrograde coming into conjunction with Mars. This is going to be energy wars, technological wars. This is when the revolution really happens and things really start to kick off. and we start to look at whether or not, you know, there's direct energy weapons and things that are being used against people, or if there is going to be this use of control that's connected to technology. And I think that if this were me, you know, knowing what I know now, this is not going to be a gentle reset that's coming. It's going to be a hard reset. That one will be an eclipse. And it almost creates these irreversible moments that we only get every so many years. And solar eclipses are going to bring new beginnings. And it's also going to be bringing up endings that kind of feel destined. This is an exact trine between Pluto, the sun, and the moon to Uranus in Gemini. That means in just short of 2 years' time, we are probably going to see that there is going to be a major revolution for the people. That it is somehow going to be tied to technology and communication. This is all at a 6, so how it's impacting our jobs, how new developments in technology is impacting our data, how we get around, how we connect, how we communicate. And this is where we're going to see everybody that's going to be like having that kind of like rebel yell about being like, no, we can't be going for war. No, we can't be allowing too much power. No, we can't allow some of this stuff to happen. So when I was looking at it, I was like, man, you know, we really need to do the work under this particular new moons. Let's go back. There we go. We really need to be doing the work under this particular full moon, excuse me, I almost said new moon, before it comes like hard and fast in 2 years' time. And I think it's giving us a preview of what is to come. It's also saying, hey, you have a voluntary opportunity to exit this system now and to release what the 2020 eclipse will eventually force us to transform. So it's like, you can rip off the bandage, you can wake up, you can have this realization now, or you can wait 2 years. And I think by consciously letting go of some of the outdated masks and emotional patterns and group dynamics or ways of kind of hiding our light, we can get ahead of the karma. Maybe the hard reset arrives in, you know, the beginning of 2028, but those who have done the inner work will experience it as like a powerful evolution rather than a painful kind of upheaval. I also was thinking a lot about the United States chart, and I would imagine, I haven't seen any videos yet about Pluto, the Pluto full moon, but if you look at this in the US chart, so I'm using the Sibley chart, you're gonna see the full moon is gonna be happening conjunct Pluto on America's south node. Now I'm a Placidus user, so this would be kind of anything that's associated with, you know, Aquarius in the second, money, resources, money tied to what? War, right? Unexpected, you know, kind of financial upheaval, where we are being hit, you know, economically because of things that are karmic or because of things that we don't see coming, or even like international kind of dramas. So that full moon is really highlighting the fact that, you know, Pluto has gotten all the way up to about 5 degrees this year. So it was in conjunction to the south node, and we're definitely seeing the financial reckoning here in the United States. From a whole sign perspective, it would be the third house. So it would be freedom, documents, communication, travel, you know, a purge collectively of media or the mindset. And I think that this is a very sensitive point in the United States chart because you're seeing it hit that south node. And this is a strong emphasis both on money, but values, talking about money, talking about values, maybe media, local networks, education, the price that we pay for freedom, and obviously our national kind of voice, because this also happens to be in the same sign as America's moon. So we have the North Node that's coming up on the United States moon. I mean, look at this, guys. We've got so many connections here. It's the United States Mars return. We're going to see the Sun and Jupiter conjuncting on the North Node in Leo in the natal 8th house, where, you know, there's going to be some financial reckoning, but it's going to be something that's actually eventually, hopefully, going to help get us out of debt, although I think that's really optimistic. And we also see Venus that's moving through Virgo, and it's coming into a square with Mars. And the Mars return, I could do a whole video in itself, but I think that's going to be talking about changes with like alliances and, you know, who we are or are not war at. I've said for months now, I'm like, look, the United States is going to say that we're at war with some country by the end of this year. And as I'm filming this video at the beginning, or kind of like the mid-July point, I mean, we're already hearing, you know, comments from Trump being like, oh yeah, we're at war now with Iran. And it's like, wait, I thought you said we weren't at war. I thought we weren't doing this. I thought it was only going to be a few days. And now it's been months. And now it almost seems like it's this constant back and forth. So it's definitely going to hit America in the pocketbook. That's for sure. And a lot of it's going to be dependent on if we're building alliances, we're working together, or if there is going to be some kind of, you know, war-related matter that's going to be really shining a light on the expenses of that. And we all know ultimately who pays for that. Taxpayers pay for that. That is also going to take away from, you know, resources and stability that we need as a country. I think with 6 degrees, it does talk about the expenses relating to health, the expenses connected to healthcare and jobs maybe. So we might see a huge fluctuation that's going on with just like how many people are being employed by health companies, where there's maybe going to be some major budget cuts that are going to be happening. That's going to also impact the United States. And I kind of see this as, you know, a way where the full moon sitting right on the south node, and then we've got Sun and Jupiter illuminating where the nation has maybe become too detached, you know, or too cold in its systems, or too focused on progress at the expense of heart and authentic leadership. And it's really asking for the collective, you know, to release outdated patterns of communication, maybe media narratives, maybe spending habits or group belonging that no longer serve us, where we're just looking at it as, you know, blindly pledging allegiance to one party, regardless of the costs, regardless of what it means, because we're ultimately the ones that are going to be kind of picking up the tab. Now, what dies here can make space for something that's more so heart-centered and also creative and generous expression, I think, of like American leadership and community. I was looking at this and I was like, be that this is where we start to see the real tension that's kind of brewing. And like, obviously Aquarius can be our friends. I mean, America and who we consider to be our friends or our allies, and where there is going to be a sense of having to cut with some people because this is being ruled by Uranus and it's trining Uranus, especially the United States, Uranus right along their descendant. So there might be a sense of cutting allies, or, you know, trade allies, or anything that's connected to, you know, strategic partnerships with certain countries for goods, food, services, what have you. And I also started thinking about how in the whole sign chart, this would be in the 3rd. So it's going to talk a lot about documents. It's going to talk about things that we sign. It's going to talk a lot about our ideas and how we connect and how we communicate. And with the North Node coming into conjunction with the Moon in Aquarius for the first time in 19 years, you're about to see what the American spirit is really all about. There's a reason why everybody thinks that us Americans are just like crazy Yankees. You know, that's the Moon in Aquarius, where we're detached. We have ideas. We used to be founded on respecting each other's differences, but being able to still go, you know, to a bar and have a drink and be able to, you know, be friendly and embrace our differences, because that's actually what makes us stronger. The feeling that I'm getting here is that there's going to be a lot of public sentiment about what's broken and how we have actually fallen away from that, and that we have kind of strayed from what made us so diverse and so beautiful. And now it's turned into this toxic kind of shit show of just people who are picking parties and lining their pockets and trying to figure out how much money they can make. And they're just literally looting the country before everything is just burned to the ground and there's nothing left. That's my concern with what's going to happen with this eventually becoming a full solar eclipse in 2 years on the South Node, which could honestly indicate major economic collapse for the United States. But we can prevent that by having these conversations now and really starting to take a look at where can we kind of enhance our relationships with other nations? How can we better understand other cultures, other religion, other philosophies about the world, and try to unite and focus on the positivity while still like embracing like our individualism? Because if we don't, by the time this becomes an eclipse and there's Mercury, Mars, a solar eclipse, a Mercury retrograde, it means like we may not be in the position of continuing to just allow Congress to fund endless wars, right? We may not be. And I suspect very strongly, and I don't know if it's going to start with this full moon. I don't know if it's going to be the one that's going to happen in 2 years, the solar eclipse. I think that there is going to be a call to have a convention, okay? to modify the United States Constitution. That's what I think is going to happen. And I think a lot of people are going to start talking about this because of the nature of the third house being a document, the second house being about money and values and resources, what we can no longer continue to dole out. And the South Node is the past. Now, what's cool is that it is trining, the descendant and Uranus. So it can mean that on one hand, it can open us up to union. On the other hand, it can open us up to conflict, And so much about this full moon is about exposing and bringing to light corruption and crime and abuse and how that is actually tied to the financial system. So I'm talking about the bankers, I'm talking about the politicians that have, been participating in some really horrendous things or selling themselves out and committing treason and getting paid by other countries to infiltrate and push laws and other things that are not actually good for the United States. And I think it's all going to come to light. I think that it's inevitable, especially with that trine to Uranus. This represents a meeting of the minds and a rethinking of what freedom actually means. And if you go and you learn about the Constitution and how the Constitution was created, it was a very complex and very tense situation because you had a lot of people that came from different colonies that did not necessarily agree or have the same perspectives. You had the states that were beginning to grow and the northern cities that were becoming kind of revolutionized and more modern versus the South that was really focusing on the old ways of doing things. So they passed the Constitution, and that also kind of bridged into then talking about the Bill of Rights and what eventually became, our freedoms. And I think that very likely you're going to start hearing a lot after this particular transit that there needs to be a convention, that we need to update. We need to reflect on what did and did not work in the past. We need to really think about how we're going to be proceeding forward with leadership. And we also need to be kind of opening our minds, getting out of the box, and trying to figure out how we can kind of bring forth more freedom, more joy, I guess, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's something that's always kind of stuck with me when I think about the United States when they originally wrote the Declaration of Independence. And not many people realize that the 4th of July here in the United States, that Declaration of Independence was really like an FU to the king, right? It was basically saying, we're breaking up with you. You have not respected, our unalienable rights. We are deciding that we're going to be sovereign, we're going to be free, and you have been, basically having taxation without representation, which, to be honest, to this day, I think in the United States, we're still seeing. Taxpayers don't get hurt. We're seeing kids that are younger than 18 years old that are working jobs and they're paying taxes, but they don't get to vote. That is taxation without representation to a T, but I'll save that. What I'm getting at is that most likely what you guys are going to find throughout this transit, which we'll be building, I mean, this is a one-time thing, but we're going to see this other solar eclipse, is we're going to start to see where I think that revolutionary energy is going to build. When we think about the Declaration of Independence, it was really a declaration of war, right? That's what it was, because shortly thereafter, it was them basically being like, okay, well, guess we're sending a bunch of redcoats to the United States, even more than what they had already occupied. And it was years of us actually going through the Revolutionary War, which was horrible. America almost didn't even win. I mean, it's like crazy when you think about some of the battles and the things that went on. And then they eventually became fully independent, even though they said they had to win the war. And then after that, we also saw that then we had the Constitution. So there was this need to go in and ratify, basically, eventually, and change some of we created the amendments. And this is where we have, the First Amendment, Second Amendment, whatever. And there have been additions that have gone on, but I think it's been some time. I mean, I'm not exactly sure. I want to say, I think it was like the 60s or the 70s was the last time that we've added an amendment. So I'm watching, I'm like, who's going to be calling for it? Because you're going to start seeing people that are going to be encouraging us to discuss having a convention to modify and update the Constitution. All right, so on to how this is going to be impacting all of us and what I'm kind of anticipating. Number one is to navigate this full moon in a grounded way, we got to take a breath. We have to just kind of roll with the punches and know that some of these houses of cards need to fall. First of all, give yourself permission to feel the thunderstorm. That's number one. I would say, Pluto conjunct the moon is bringing up some very intense emotions, power dynamics, or old wounds around belonging and authenticity. We don't need to rush. We don't need to fix. We don't need to bypass them. Let the feelings move through you and just observe. Second is get precise, because this is happening at 6 degrees. So that Virgo flavored kind of degree, it's about using discernment. This ended, is that good? You know, is this a healthy change? Is it, you know, the right time? Did I go about it the right way? And ask yourself what exactly needs to be released and what is no longer serving your joy, your leadership, your creativity, your capacity to love. Write it down and be specific. And then third, I would say, work with the supportive aspects. Use that trine to Uranus to invite sudden insights and new ideas. Pay attention to flashes of clarity. And the sextile to Neptune is also about encouraging us to tap into our own inner guidance, our own compass, to focus on creative or spiritual practices that really help us release with compassion rather than with force. But finally, and what I want you guys to really remember is, you know, you want to release what needs to be released to create space. It's almost like, and I've said this before in readings, like sometimes a client will ask me a question, why haven't I gotten the house or the job or the perfect partner? And then the Tower card comes up and I'm like, you have to go through the Tower moment. You're still in that process of clearing space before it can kind of come in. So this full moon is not necessarily about letting go. I think something that you're going to hear, you know, from all of like the kind of like online astrologers is like, ooh, this thing's going to die, you know, and it's got to burn to the ground and it's going to be intense. And I would say, yeah, maybe, but it's more about that moon Pluto opposing the sun and Jupiter, and that we have to create the room or the space for something that's getting ready to emerge, some positive aspects, some joy, something creative. And it's really focusing on what you want to call in your more authentic self. It's also about, you know, expression, more heart-centered leadership, joyful creativity, and better and more so honest connections. As for who's going to be feeling this the hardest, I mean, I think everybody collectively is going to feel this. But if you have anything, I would say around 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 degrees of anything in your chart, you're going to feel it, because we've got all of these here, particularly the air and the fire signs. You guys are going to feel this the most, okay? But if you have anything, I would say, yeah, about 3 to 7 degrees of Aquarius or Leo, this is definitely going to be impacting you. If you have anything from 3 to 7 degrees of the fixed signs, so Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, you're going to be feeling it. And obviously, you know, I would say my Aquarius risings and my Gemini risings, because it's really kind of highlighting you personally, or, you know, Uranus being the ruler in Gemini. And the rituals that I would recommend for this full moon is just take the trash out, dude. Literally take out the trash. Anything that's going to be about illuminating something you're afraid of, anything that represents, you know, exposing the shadow, doing the shadow work, healing it, and maybe doing that with other people, right? Aquarius. Now, I would personally say what a good time to work with air and fire, and probably lean into the direction of lighting a candle, maybe writing out all of the things that you've been afraid of, and then, you know, running that through a flame and letting it kind of turn to ash. Obviously be safe, but put it in like a fire safe bowl or something. Or you could do something with a group of friends where everybody is able to kind of call out loud what it is that they're, you know, trying to overcome or what they're afraid of right now. And getting that feedback from other people where they're like, you can do it. We believe in you. You know, we can help you make that change. And if you're somebody who does spiritual rituals or things like that, definitely doing that with a group of friends or doing that with a group of other, you know, spiritually minded people can also be very, very, very positive. I would assume, I mean, this kind of reminds me of where they were talking about like the Etsy witch, where everybody's like, oh, you know, the Etsy witch put a, you know, a curse on Charlie Kirk, and, you know, that's why he died, and blah, 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 blah. And everybody was talking about it. You know, Pluto can deal with witches. Capricorn is too, but I could definitely see occultists, people who are, you know, maybe very intensely involved in witchcraft, I mean, darker magic, like very kind of like, you know, darker things within occultism that they're trying to basically bring up collectively, where everybody's like panicking, or they're trying to, you know, say that they're going to harm some kind of leader, or that they were, you know, putting a curse on them. I could definitely see that somehow kind of coming into the collective. But I would work with air and fire. So candles, chimes, writing things, saying it out loud. If you guys want to work with herbs, I would say lavender, rosemary, dill, and peppermint. can be good. So whether you're cooking with it, you're throwing some in a bath, you're putting some on a candle. And I like working with amethyst, labradorite, aquamarine, or clear quartz for crystals if you guys want to do any grid work, or if you want to throw a couple crystals in your pocket or in your book bag or in your purse. And essential oils that would be good would be eucalyptus, frankincense, rosemary, and lavender, okay? For those of you guys who want to get witchy with it. And I'm now going to move on to the 12 sign predictions, and we're going to talk about how this is going to be impacting each and every one of the 12 rising signs. I'm a Western whole sign astrologer. That's the system that I'm going to be showing you guys today. I recommend listening to your rising sign first to see exactly where the full moon illumination is taking place. Remember, it's not just the house that it's taking place in, it's also highlighting the opposition to Jupiter and having to confront some kind of major conclusion and transformation in Aquarius to receive the abundance that's going to come in Leo. And it's also making that aspect to Uranus and Gemini through the trine and its rulership. Now, listen to your sun sign to see how this is impacting you emotionally in terms, personally in terms of your career and your overall vitality. And the moon sign is going to be about more how it's impacting you emotionally with your home and your family. If you have Aquarius anywhere in your big three, you should be listening to this. Also, if you have Leo anywhere in your big three, you should be listening to this as well. And just due to the nature of the sun conjunct Jupiter, my Leos and Leo risings are going to feel it. My Sagittarius are going to feel it. And as well, my Cancer risings are going to be feeling it too, because their chart ruler is hitting Pluto. And remember, this is that huge kapow moment that's going to be happening after we had the Jupiter-Pluto opposition on the 20th of July. So I'm doing all these videos way before any of these transits happen. So likely many of us are all going to collectively be like shocked and surprised about what's kind of being reborn or what's emerging. Remember, child coming out of an eggshell. All right, so let's get into this. We're going to do the 12 rising signs. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to be starting first with my Aries and my Aries risings. There we go. Is that right? Is that already there? No? Hold on, guys. Sorry. I need to make sure it's the right housing system. There we go. Okay. Let's see if I can go back. Yeah, we can do that. All right, so we're going to now start with my Aries and my Aries rising. So you guys are going to be experiencing the full moon taking place in the sign of Aquarius in your natal 11th house. Obviously, it is really highlighting anything that's kind of connected to your friendships, your communities, your future vision. And I think with Jupiter coming into conjunction with the sun in your 5th house, it's saying that it's really putting a spotlight on what's going to make you happy, your self-expression, your own business, your kids, your joy. And really the deeper meaning that's kind of coming through this particular full moon is that you're being asked to release group dynamics, online communities, and long-term hopes that have been emotionally detached or no longer reflecting your kind of authentic heart. There may be a reckoning between fitting in and truly being seen. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. It's not unusual when you have a full moon in the 11th house that you're like, okay, are my dreams becoming a reality? Are they coming true? Can there be a shakedown happening in your online communities or with a friend or some kind of shocking, surprising, news that's connected to friends? Sure. The aspects are nicer with the sextile to Neptune. And obviously you've got Mars, your ruler, building into a trine with the North Node. So I think a lot of you guys are going to be feeling really incentivized to connect and communicate, to travel, to learn, and honestly, to kind of collaborate with other people. If I were an Aries rising, something that I would think about with this full moon is asking yourself where you've been performing or maybe shrinking in social spaces, and give yourself permission to step back from groups, maybe that drain you, and kind of pour your energy into something creative or into something that is like a hobby, maybe even romantic expression that feels joyful and it feels genuine. Quite literally, I'm an Aries moon, I would be like, I'm not getting sucked into the drama out in the world. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think that this is the beginning of something new, and I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic and I'm joyful, and I'm going to be a part of the change. And I'm so excited to kind of be one of those people who's helping create and express maybe some of the things that people are kind of feeling collectively. I think also the Uranus trine can bring sudden liberating clarity around who you want to create and kind of connect with. So let's ask the tarot, what do Aries and Aries risings need to know or be aware of? What advice would you give them for this full moon in Aquarius? I get the Ace of Cups, which is funny, you know, it's like very much the fifth house, which is like love, romance, creativity. Is there a reckoning in your love life? Is there some realization about your friendships and relationships? Ace of Cups is usually foreshadowing that there's about to be a new relationship that's emerging. So I think that's true. And that may mean that it takes you maybe being in a space where you feel like the oddball or the odd man out or something that doesn't feel good, that you're like, I need to go and spend some time and work on the relationship with myself, you know? Could it mean that you go to a party and you meet somebody and there's a romantic connection? Sure, but it would be intense, right? Moon and Pluto conjunct there. And I think that also it's going to represent where you're going to see collectively where some of your friends, 11th house, are going through a lot of relational issues. And you could find that you're like sitting in spaces where you've got friends, you know, kind of carrying on about their ex-husbands or their baby mamas, you know, or their issues with their love life. That may make you go, I don't want to lose this idea of finding the one. I don't want to fall out of love with my partner. I don't want to have doom and gloom. I want romance. I want more joy. I want more collaboration. And so can there be an epiphany that you have that leads you to better relational, you know, kind of awareness? Yeah, I think so. Could it mean that it's also the relationship with yourself? Probably. That's kind of getting highlighted. But watch for that. Watch for some pretty dramatic changes, I think, in relationships that are actually going to be good for you in the long run. All right, we've got my Taurus and Taurus risings. You guys are going to be experiencing the full moon in Aquarius in your 10th house of career and reputation. It is opposing the sun and Jupiter in your 4th house of home, family, and roots. Really want to keep bringing your guys' attention to that Chiron square, because Taurus, in a way, you are almost the person who is balancing the scales. You're mediating, how much do I give to family? How much do I give to my career and my social status? Okay, so this is very significant in that regard. 10th house is about your public image, while the sun and Jupiter in your 4th house of home and family and roots wants to expand. So the deeper meaning here is that old definitions of success or public roles may no longer feel emotionally safe or nourishing, and that's being illuminated for you, right? So it's not unusual with a full moon conjunct Pluto here that there is like a big announcement about a change in your professional alliances, your romantic relationships with your clients, with your allies. And it can be getting a big, job opportunity. It could be, deciding you're retiring. It could represent that one chapter of your work is kind of wrapping up, and you're trying to find that balance between who you've been out in the world while the sun and Jupiter are kind of pulling you kind of into your inner landscape. So there's this tension between your professional ambition and your need for stable, nurturing private life. If I were a Taurus rising, I would basically be asking myself, what kind of a legacy actually feels good in your body, right? Because of the square to Taurus. Release any public image or career path that requires you to abandon your emotional needs. This is a powerful time to realign, I think, your outer work with your inner security. Now, Venus at the time, your ruler, is sitting in the 5th house, and that basically means that part of the storyline is, I want to work for myself, or I want to take a chance, or I want to launch a creative business. It's also in a square to Mars, so there's a little bit of tension between, the money that you need to make, the money you've been making, your financial situation, and maybe trying to find ways to diversify your income so that way you feel like you have more time to be creative and self-expressive. I think especially if you're 0 to about 6-7 degrees of Taurus, sun, moon, or rising, that square is going to show you whether or not your body is telling you, hey, you're doing too much, and whether it's too much time at home or if it's too much time at work. And it's asking you to slow down and really kind of integrate this so that way there can be a change. But big changes at work with moon conjunct Pluto, somebody can step down, there can be a big, kind of public kind of announcement that's being made. And I do think for a lot of you guys, it will also be a public announcement because the moon is connected to what you think and what you have to say, while Pluto is associated more with like your partnerships, relationships. So if you're in a position where you're having to tell clients something, or you're having to make a big announcement with a business partner, or maybe it's something about your relationship status changing. The card that I get is the Knight of Cups. So you'll be making these decisions intuitively. There is a sense of you being like, I feel like this is the direction I need to go in, and I feel like this is necessary. And what's interesting is like, there is nothing very relational about this. To me, it feels like you're either going to be unifying with very powerful people, which could be, you know, the Knight of Cups saying, hey, there's a new professional relationship. There is an alliance that's coming in. There is going to be a collaboration. But it can also be saying that intuitively, you're listening to what your gut is telling you needs to change and transform, and what direction you ultimately need to be going in. Now, water signs, Cancers, Scorpios, Pisces, these can be people who are kind of coming in. You're feeling very maybe excited. There can be a sense of you feeling emotionally charged to make this big decision about your career and your status. Just recognize that whatever this is going to be is either going to be impacting home, or it's going to be kind of aligning with the fact that maybe you do need to move, or there is a change with your family. You know, something like that is going to be kind of popping up. So I'm curious to see how it manifests for you guys. Loving that trine to Uranus, because I definitely feel like it's giving you this opportunity to really change something about your resources, and maybe give you, you know, the opportunity to really focus on finding new income streams, or redefining what it means to be wealthy, right? Or to be like secure. So let me know what happens, Taurus. Gemini and Gemini rising, you guys are going to see a full moon in Aquarius in a fellow sister sign, obviously trining Uranus. So if you're an early degree Gemini or Gemini rising, I think you guys will kind of dig this one. For you guys, this is happening in your 9th house of philosophy and your higher mind and your higher vision. And that full moon is conjunct Pluto in the 9th house, while there's an opposition to the Sun and Jupiter in your 3rd house. And this is the house of communication and your daily mind. So the feeling that I'm getting with this one for you guys is that it's just really highlighting outdated belief systems or ways of speaking your truth that feel very disconnected from emotional reality, and that's what's being challenged. Now, you may also notice a gap between what you intellectually believe and what you actually feel. What I would recommend during this particular full moon is to do some journaling. I think that would be really helpful. You know, maybe journal the difference between your public philosophy and your private emotional truth. Maybe practice speaking from both your mind and also your heart this month. And this is about releasing rigid ideas that can actually really open up space for more better integrated and emotionally kind of honest messaging. Now, you're going to like this because the trine to Uranus means that it's going to give you the opportunity to tap into that Uranian energy. So you could, you know, be in an airport or traveling, you know, oftentimes that happens, or you're going back to school, or you're getting ready to teach a class, or you're publishing something. So it does work, and it's quite friendly with that. You're also going to see Mercury at the time of this particular full moon, your ruler, is now direct in the 2nd house. So you've likely worked out a lot of the kinks with the changes with your resources and your money. It is still slightly in a square to Saturn, so it may mean that you feel some financial pressure to show up in a social way, meet friends, go out, connect, socialize, and money can still feel a little tight, but that is going to start getting better. And usually when I see like a full moon in the 9th house, people are saying, okay, I'm finally going on that trip, or I'm graduating, you know, from a program, or maybe I'm going to be finally launching my book. And most likely what you're going to find is with the connection with the moon and Pluto, it means that you're really investing in things that you deem valuable, new skills, right? Taking classes, courses, or maybe it means that you just feel like you need to kind of upgrade something that's connected to travel, and you feel like it's worth spending the money on because it's going to be kind of enriching your philosophy or your frame of mind. So let's take a look. Let's see what we can tell you about this particular full moon for Gemini and Gemini rising. Oh, I love this. 3 of Cups. So togetherness, celebrating, being around people who you feel like are your tribe. So there could be a wedding, a graduation, a celebration. I'm kind of like spitballing here, but I'm kind of wondering, like with Mercury square Saturn, like do some of you guys know that there's some trip coming up and you're trying to budget for it? You know, do you know that there's going to be a wedding soon and you're trying to kind of figure out, you know, am I going to be going to this friend's wedding or not? Yes, there could be some dramatic kind of change ups that's happening with travel, with Moon Pluto. But if that happens, it looks like any delays or setbacks are actually going to be positive. You'll be able to work through it. And if you can't take an airplane, you might actually consider, you know, renting a car or driving somewhere if getting on a plane is like out of the question. But I don't see that squashing your goals. I don't see that squashing your plans. And I really feel like whatever you're going to be a part of, people are going to be celebrating with you. And it means that you're going to be around a lot of like-minded kind of individuals. So I hope that's a good reading for you guys. And I'm curious to see where you guys are potentially going or what you're celebrating. All right, Gemini and Gemini rising, Cancer and Cancer rising. I was looking at Gemini. Cancer, you've got a full moon in Aquarius. This is going to be in your natal 8th house. And we know that you're ruled by the moon. So this is one hell of a moon for you guys. Moon is meeting with Pluto in your 8th house of resources, intimacy, other people's money, and deep psychological transformation. Now, this is happening when the sun is coming into conjunction with Jupiter in your 2nd house of self-worth, personal resources, your things. The deeper meaning behind this is that there will be power dynamics, I think, that are going to be kind of coming up within your close one-on-one relationships, your finances, or emotional merging, where you have maybe made yourself feel small or overly guarded. And I think that's kind of coming to light. And this can feel very vulnerable, but it can also be very necessary. Now, because you're the moon and it's going through the 8th house, it means that it's really highlighting where bills are coming due, where you're dealing with taxes, where you're dealing with other people's money. And Pluto is going to represent your 5th house. So it could be you take a risk and it pays off, right? And that's either a hobby or a romantic relationship, an investment. And this could also represent where, you know, finally there could be a sense of somebody wanting to make a deal. I've got a lot of Cancer risings that are going through lawsuits right now that are in my practice that I've seen. And a lot of them are like, you know, do you think that they're going to make a deal? And I'm like, you got to wait, you know, until you get to this full moon to see if they're going to crack and potentially say, okay, you know, we'll do it. And if it's not that, it could be about intimate romantic relationships and going to the next level and learning to kind of trust and like be vulnerable again. And the moon is going to oppose the sun, which is your resources, and Jupiter, which is going to represent work. Some of my Cancer risings might actually get a nice bonus or a very lucrative offer, or there could be some kind of nice bump in their pay. And I think that for you, you know, it's really about being honest about where you have given your power away. And I don't know if that's in intimate or financial situations. I think it's also about practicing small acts of receiving and setting boundaries with other people, which might need to happen, and releasing old merging patterns that can lead to greater self-worth and healthier intimacy. Now, I mean, Sun Jupiter could quite literally be some of you guys going, I just secured a new job, you know, it's a bigger pay or there's a bonus. I could also see some of you guys going, oh my gosh, I've just inherited something because somebody left something to me, or I'm trying to confront a romantic partner about our, you know, savings or spending habits, or I'm talking to my kids, you know, about dealing with college, you know, tuition and debts and loans. So it really depends on your personal situation. I would just say the sun and the moon opposition every month is rather intense for you. And with the moon in opposition to Jupiter, somebody else's loss or somebody else giving something up looks like it's actually going to be your gain. So I think with that trine to Uranus, intuitively, you might know that this is coming, and it may involve some kind of change with your home or with your living situation, because that's going to be at a 4. I don't know. Or maybe you had a dream, or even it's this reading that's telling you, hey, you're about to hit it big. And there is the Queen of Coins. So definitely your business sense, your sense of financial savviness maybe is paying off, right? Paying off your debt, coming up with a budget, saving money, and then realizing, wow, okay, you know, I've made some really smart moves. Now things are going well. And the Queen of Coins can actually be a Capricorn, a Taurus, or a Virgo. It can represent an older woman in your life that's kind of bringing something valuable to you, and utilizing your keen business sense and knowing where to make an investment, where to make a change, and ultimately where to transform something about your security. So whether it's you investing in yourself or somebody investing in you, it does look like this is going to be something that's going to pay off. And one thing I would say is about a day or two later, when the moon comes in conjunction with the North Node, give it about 2 days, watch what happens. It looks like you're going to go through a huge emotional, financial, or psychological shift, and you're going to feel, I think, better supported, more confident, and definitely a sense of more abundance that's coming in. So good luck with that one. Great card for what can be some really intense aspects between the 2nd and the 8th. All right, my Leos and Leo risings, you guys are going to see a full moon in Aquarius in your opposite sign in the 7th house of relationships. anything that's associated maybe with romantic partners, marriage, your marketplace, business partners, all of that stuff. And obviously you're ruled by the sun. So like Cancer, when you see the full moon, it always represents an opposition to your ruler. Now the sun and Jupiter is moving through your first house, which is great. It's expansive, it's warm, it's very jolly. There's a lot of positive things that are kind of on the horizon for you. But the full moon is showing you where you don't always see that in the relationships with others, okay? So your therapist is your seventh house, your business partner is your spouse. And this is telling me that the house of partnerships is really getting lit up, and really like masks you've worn in relationships, whether to be liked, to keep the peace, to perform, are now being illuminated. So we see that tension between who am I for others with the full moon in the seventh, and then, does it make me happy? Is it good for me? Is this something that I want? Is very strong right now. And usually with a full moon in the seventh house, you're going to see a lot of dramatic changes with other people, not so much for you. And something that kind of comes to mind is like, yeah, and I said this in the other video, not everybody is going to celebrate some of your growth and some of your accomplishments. Other people might be jealous or envious. You may also notice that with the moon representing your subconscious in the 12th house and Pluto representing, what is private and hidden about family or relationships is now coming to light. So like, yes, can this be like this cosmic crucible moment, for a romantic relationship? Absolutely. 100%. But if something does get phased out of your life here, and let's say a marriage ends, a relationship ends, there's some tragic, kind of like loss or separation, really the question is it actually going to be positive for you in the long run? Now, my Leos, you've only had one eclipse, right, so far that's been in Aquarius, and that one was actually squaring Uranus when it was in Taurus in your 10th house. So it was more tension with your business relationships, tension with your marriage and your career. Maybe there was like a lot of tension revolving around inconsistency in relationship in your career, and that it made very little time, to be dating or kind of being with people. Maybe this one is going to be a time where you have to ask yourself, are you still performing in your closest relationships? I would be practicing showing up as your real authentic self, even if it feels kind of a little exposing at first. And the reward is going to be much more authentic connections and a sense of stronger self. And if you're not doing that, then what you're going to feel like is somebody's kind of dimming your positivity, dimming your light. They're stealing the spotlight, or maybe they're not positive or as happy or supportive of some of the things that you're doing. And if you see your partner going through something, or your best friend, or one of your family members that's going through crisis, you may feel like you can't really share the good things that are happening in your life. We've all had those conversations where it's like, you get a raise, or there's some big, positive thing that happens in your life or in your relationship, and you call your best friend and you can't wait to tell them, and you're like, how are you? And they're like, actually, I'm going through a breakup, and you don't want to tell them you just got engaged, or somebody's lost their job, and you don't want to be like, okay, now's not a good time to kind of share the fact that, my business, I just launched my business and it's doing well. These are the kind of dynamics that you guys are going to see. I like that this is trining and also sextiling to you, Uranus. So it tells me that if you're having, girl problems, you're going to find that there's going to be network support, friends that are going to kind of have your back through that. But this would be one of the full moons that I would be like, yeah, if a relationship's going to end, it would be now. And maybe having to confront, relationship issues that have been a long time coming, or things with family, or things that are kind of connected to your home. But Sun and Jupiter is like you being like, I know everything happens for a reason. I'm protected. The universe has got my back. Ultimately, if I'm not meant to be with this person, universe, show me. And you're going to see very quickly whether or not this is supposed to be for you. Okay, and that can be in any regard. If you have a healthy relationship right now, it doesn't mean your relationship's going to end, but you might see some kind of shadow stuff that's going on with within that connection to the other person. All right, for Leo and Leo rising, you get the sun. What did I just say? I said focus on your own positivity and your own joy. Don't let other people dim your sunshine. Okay, and the sun card is so great because you see this little kid running around, he's got the flag, he's making an announcement, about what's going on. And this represents breakthrough, especially like in a career sense or in a personal sense. So there could be some big accomplishments. Like, can people get engaged or get married, or can there be some big milestones with a full moon here? Absolutely. So you might be like, we've been through some shit, but like things are actually, we made it through the other side. And like, that's what we have to kind of like celebrate. So in that sense, I think it's actually quite positive, but I'm still going to keep telling you guys, there's going to be some people who are going to be haters, and you have to not get sucked into that and just be more focused on being on your own path and not caring as much about what other people say, and trying to nurture and support the relationships that are solid in your life. So that way you really feel like you can continue on with some of these positive things that are kind of happening. So I really want to hear from you guys. You and Aquarius and Scorpios are the ones I really want to hear from, because I want to see what's going to happen. Good luck. I hope it's as good as the cards are saying so far. No whammies. So let's kind of keep the good times rolling. All right, Virgo and Virgo rising. You guys are going to do this full moon in Aquarius, conjunct Pluto in your natal 6th house of health, work, daily routine, service, pets, and it's going to be opposing the Sun and Jupiter in your natal 12th house. Okay, so that's about spirituality, alone time, reflection, healing, foreign lands, the subconscious. And I really think the deeper meaning here is that you guys are going to see old patterns of over-functioning, perfectionism, or hidden self-sacrifice in your daily life that are now being exposed. It's possible that your body and your nervous system might be signaling that something needs to change. Now, obviously, Pluto is going to be connected to how you communicate, your mindset, and how you think. The moon's going to be connected to friends. So friends, networking, or community might actually provide you some insight with how to better change your health, how to get rid of an old habit, how to help support you, with work, or maybe make connections somehow in a professional sense with friends. And I also think that a tip that I would give you guys would be to slow down. Listen to your body this month. Release any daily routines or work habits that are actually draining you. You need to balance out that 12th and the 6th house. And Moon Pluto could definitely bring some rather, kind of difficult health-related matters. Aquarius is the nervous system. It also has associations with your ankles. It could be connected to your digestion. I would keep an eye on the health of my pets with this one. I would also be not forcing myself or being too critical on myself when it comes to my health and my habits. And even though you're starting a cycle now where the North Node's going through there and you're going to be really focused on productivity, that Sun and Jupiter in your 12th house is you need sleep too. You need to have that lazy Sunday, or you need that spiritual practice to kind of, flush out some of the monotony of the work and the grind. Maybe you need to have a little, private space in your home or your apartment where you can play music, you can create, you can draw, you can dream. And I would say by prioritizing rest in your inner work, that clarity comes from your subconscious, and it can actually help restructure your daily life in a much more sustainable way. Now, for some of you guys, it's, well, I'm traveling and I'm taking time off of work. Great. Or I'm finally ending a toxic work, kind of situation, and I'm taking a bit of a hiatus. Awesome. Just be mindful of your habits and where there can be a tendency to overindulge behind the scenes because you're so overstimulated and overexhausted because of work. Now, Mercury is your ruler. It's not doing much. It's going to be coming out of a square with Saturn. So there's been a lot of back and forth about how do you communicate your goals, how do you connect with people and learn how to be more vulnerable. This full moon, I almost said eclipse, this full moon also trines Uranus, so it's going to soften some of the changes that's been happening at work, and it's going to bring maybe in a new schedule, a new coworker, a new office space, maybe a new, just schedule in general. And these are flowing together very nicely. The only thing that I'm kind of about is the Venus-Mars square. And that tells me that you're going to be very busy getting work done, and you might feel like you have very little time for self-care, pleasure, dating, romance. And this, for those of you guys who are traveling, or let's say you've been away, you're going to come back and you're going to be like, okay, it's time for me to get back into the groove, or I got to get back into, prepping my food, or, getting up early for work, or going back to the gym. And so doing that with friends, or changing your mindset about the way that you look at your daily habits and routine, I think is everything. And just me personally, after coming out of several years of having the North Node in my 6th house, I realized I was going to the gym, working out, cleaning, like, and these are things generally you Virgo risings like you're better with this than I would be. I was like, these are rituals. And the more that I ritualize this and the more that I treat it as such, the more I'm going to realize it's actually benefiting me. So try to have that mindset is, I guess, what I would say. And the card that you get is the Six of Coins. So balance, moderation, give and take, which is so much the nature, I think, of not only a full moon, but especially when Moon Pluto could be, you know, everything's terrible, or, you know, I have terrible health, or I have terrible habits. And then the Sun Jupiter is like, everything's great, you know? And I think you're just trying to kind of find that middle ground. And what you're investing yourself into, you need to know when to kind of take a step back and be like, enough is enough. I can't overdo it, good or bad, because we need to have like moderation when it comes to this full moon, especially in these particular houses. Also, I would say you get what you pay for. If you're willing to pay for, you know, a decent doctor or a good, you know, a good gym, or maybe like a new way of like working out or kind of connecting with a community, it may yield really significant results. And the Sun Jupiter makes me feel like you might be joining a private club of sorts, or that there can be like a private alliance that's kind of going on where you're being asked to go and work one-on-one with somebody, or maybe you're working with a trainer or a therapist. Especially if you're having a bad time getting rid of, I think, habits under this one, I would highly recommend working with a hypnotherapist or working with like a talk therapist, because it's going to make you aware of where this has become embedded in your subconscious, and you can release it in a subconscious state. And it's just really wonderful for healing. So invest yourself in things that are going to benefit your productivity, your health, and overall your peace. All right, we've got Libra and Libra rising. You guys are going to be experiencing a full moon in Aquarius in your natal 5th house. And if you have anything, I would say maybe about 0 to 6 degrees Libra, sun, moon, or rising, you are the sign that's going to experience a grand air trine. Okay, so the 5th house is, I think, one of the better houses in astrology, personally. It deals with taking chances, risks, our children, creativity, our love life, self-expression, playtime, having fun. And the 5th house is like being on the stage, being in the sandbox, learning to play, connect, and also share your unique talents with the world, right? So what you're going to find is that this is opposing the Sun and Jupiter in your natal 11th house. And this is going to be really highlighting your goals, your friends, your connections to society, communities that you're a part of, and also your future vision. So the deeper meaning for this full moon for Libras is that you're actually moving through creative blocks. You're moving through performative romance or group dynamics that maybe have stifled your authentic joy is now being illuminated. What you'll find is that there could be some tension between what your communities expect and what your heart actually really wants you to create. So one way of looking at this is, you know, if the 5th house is your kid, right? It's going to be like, I want to spend more time with my kid, but, you know, I also want to spend time with my friends. It could mean that this is my hobby and this thing that I like to do. It's my baby, but, you know, I'm being called to now go and share this with other people and get feedback from other people about what I create, how I create. I think that, you know, there's probably going to be this theme that's really about reconnecting to what genuinely brings you joy and creative flow, even if it doesn't fit your usual image. It's really good for releasing any creative projects or romantic situations that feel performative, and it could be new, more authentic. It's also about connections that can emerge when you really lead with your real heart. Now, where it gets interesting is that it's trining Uranus, so it means that it might be traveling for the sake of joy and pleasure. It might mean taking an art class. It might mean publishing something or something that's connected to you know, digital things, intellectual things, anything that's going to be about working with, you know, innovations in how you create and how you share and connect and travel. And when I look at the air trine, I think it's going to be really good for Libra risings, because everything's going to unlock where you can go, okay, I can find balance, I can find joy, I can also share, and I can travel. And I would just say create for the sake of creating, not because you want people to accept you or to like you. Having Aquarius in the 5th house means that you love differently, you're going to be playing differently, you're going to be creating differently. And obviously, you know, Venus, your ruler, is in the 12th house. So you don't really feel like sharing things right now. You know, there's a sense of you being like, I need more time before I'm ready to drop this news or share this thing or whatever. And that you may be a little hesitant to put yourself out there with Venus and Mars square to really kind of share what's on your heart and what's on your mind. Now, obviously this goes without being said, Libra, you know, if you have a full moon here, there can be a pretty dramatic thing going on involving your love life, your children, getting pregnant, and anything that's going to be about taking risks. But no risk, no reward. And in this case, the thing that you've been afraid to share, I think, with people, it's only going to get bigger, you know, because now the North Node is here. So you're going to start kind of sharing new things. And it may surprise you that if you share something different or if you go on a different spin with something creatively, people might really love what it is that you're putting together. I don't know. All right, so let's take a look. What can we tell Libras and Libra risings about this particular full moon? I guess the only one kind of like sidebar I would be like is like, yeah, you know, Moon Pluto is, you know, a big creative change that impacts your status or your career, or, you know, where a kid might be really throwing a monkey wrench into something in terms of your, you know, future plans and your kind of career and reputation. And some of you guys might call it off with romantic partners, or there could be some heartbreak. Okay, the card that I get for you is the Knight of Wands. So wonderful, especially when we think about the 5th house energy. It has this solar energy to it. And you kind of like racing towards what actually gets your blood pumping, what is going to make you feel excited, what feels maybe a little risky. This can also be about an Aries, a Leo, or a Sagittarius. And I think it's about taking creative risks. That's really what I think this is going to be about, and kind of getting outside of the box. News coming about creative projects, or maybe you're giving, you know, your audience some sneak peeks on things that you're kind of working on or stuff that you're creating. And I would say watch where you're feeling that excitement. That's what you want to be running towards. And that's really the setup for like the next 2 years of having the North Node in the 5th house. It's got to be things that you're obsessed with and the things that you love. So maybe it's a new romantic partner. Maybe it's going to be a fling. I don't know. But whatever it is, it's going to be exciting. And I think that you guys are really going to like it. So let me know what happens. All right, my Scorpios. This is very personal for you just due to the nature of the full moon conjunct Pluto. So you may not be an Aquarius or a Leo. But if you are an early degree Scorpio, you're going to see a grand fixed cross. And if you haven't watched my video that I did on Tuesday about the Jupiter-Pluto opposition, trust me, it's worth it. Go listen to it because you're going to get a lot of treasure in that. A full moon in your 4th house is, in a way, very personally illuminating, but it's very private, okay? And the full moon is very comfortable here because the moon's coming into territory that feels familiar. It's about home, property, family, anything that's connected to your living situation, your roommates, anything that's connected to, yeah, your roots. And you're going to see the illumination of the Sun and Jupiter moving into conjunction in your natal 10th house of career and reputation. It's also about your career goals, your public legacy. So the deeper meaning here is that old family patterns, ancestral emotional wounds, old home family dynamics that no longer support who you're becoming are now being brought to the surface. Now, this can feel like a deep private reckoning that has the potential to really impact something about your public life. And the 4th house is very private. The 10th house is very public. So it can mean that you're going through something privately that is gut-wrenching, you know, challenges with family, changes with your living situation, sometimes disappointments over things that are kind of going on at home. And you're trying to look at it and go, okay, I'm trying to be positive and optimistic about this, but I also don't know how much I actually want to share with people about what's potentially changing. Now, I would say with this aspect, it's unique because it's going to be squaring Chiron. So it can mean that there's some relationship issues that are going on right now that has the potential to really disrupt either your family relationships, your home, and also simultaneously, you know, push you to evolve out of those relational kind of issues and really show up and kind of be confident and take charge and be a leader with the Sun and Jupiter in your 10th house and try to basically be like, I can handle this. And also the more that you are handling emotionally or whatever chapters you're closing out or you're completing, it's almost going to like lighten the load to make it easier for you to have more career success, be more visible, have more joy. So you are one of the signs that I would say, look, you know, if you're listening to those kind of like cookie cutter astrologers on the internet that are writing these articles or doing these 10-minute videos saying to you, you're going to have this amazing breakout in your career and it's going to be awesome. I'm going to be like, yes, if you decide to, you know, finally detach yourself from where you're living, your home situation, old family dramas, and like you do the catharsis, you know, type of work and release that stuff. So that way you can actually finally feel strong, confident, and successful in your own right. Now, this is also about, I think for you guys, you know, giving yourself time and space for emotional processing, especially around home and family themes. Maybe release old stories about what success looks like and what that maybe was shaped by family expectations. A more emotionally rooted version of leadership can emerge from this clearing. And I think there's going to be a lot of Scorpio risings that are going to be going, you know, I've been fighting for that one parent's, you know, kind of like recognition my whole life. And now I have finally made it. And you may get that recognition from one of your parents now. They might be like, wow, you really did it. You may also feel like you have to break away from home or where you're living and you have to kind of step out of the shadows and now into the light and really give yourself that opportunity to enjoy this moment to kind of be just like a star. So I think that especially if you have anything in early Scorpio, this is going to be very interesting for you. And it's going to show you that, you know, the home stuff must change to better support the relationship stuff. The relationship stuff needs to heal to better support the career stuff. And I promise you, even if there's some heavy stuff that comes up with this full moon, like, oh my God, my landlord's selling my house, or, you know, I lost a family member, or I have to relocate, I would say, think of the positive. How can you celebrate life? How can you look at this as an opportunity to turn over a new leaf? How can you be excited about the fact that you're now going to get some new freedom? And Jupiter is going to be connected to money, resources, wealth, and values, while the moon is going to be connected to your 9th house. And it means you have to shift your philosophy about how home and family look, and you have to be able to kind of balance that with some expansion in your career. And that's going to be a next, you know, 18 months kind of balancing act that you're going to be doing. And I'm really excited to see how this manifests. I guess in closing for you, you know, your other ruler, Mars, is still going through Gemini in your 8th house. So there's a lot of conversation about joint money, things that's going on with resources, with taxes, debt, inheritance. And Mars is coming into a trine with the North Node. So you're feeling incentivized to not only change joint resources, but also intimacy and psychological themes to help you feel more energized to start getting things done on the home front. And Mars and Venus squares, so there may be some friction maybe in social relationships or finances, but nevertheless, I think the trine between Pluto and Uranus is also your saving grace. Woof. Okay, we're on a roll. Let's keep it going. No whammies. We've got the Magician. And I think I kind of feel inclined to tell Scorpios, it's like you have everything at your disposal right now to make change happen across the board, right? And that's what's beautiful about the Magician, as above, so below. So if you can imagine it, if you can think about it, if you can manifest it, if you can envision it, you know, then it can manifest. And it has to come down from the ether. So there's like downloads that are going to be happening. And you've got all of the elements, as the Magician does, at your table to make magic happen, to manifest a whole new reality. And most likely, some of you guys are going to see some kind of career success that's going to kind of get you out of the emotional slump or the home or the family drama stuff that's going on. Now, the Magician also has associations with, you know, in a lot of decks with, you know, being something that is initiatory, you know, and it's something that's going to be like kind of first developed, the first steps. And maybe you're going to start to see, because this is the first full moon in Aquarius when the North Node is there, of what the future of your home and your family kind of looks like. So buying houses, selling houses, big drama with home or living situations, you know, and the impact that that has on your career or your relationships is definitely something that you're going to want to watch for. Scorpio, let me know how it goes. Thankfully, you've got some good energy in your 10th house. All right, Sag and Sag rising, you guys are going to be doing the full moon in Aquarius in your natal 3rd house. Obviously, this full moon is going to be opposing the Sun and Jupiter, your chart ruler, in the natal 9th house. So having a full moon in the 3rd house is really putting the spotlight on communication, learning, your local environment, and it's being kind of illuminated from the Sun and Jupiter in your 9th house of beliefs, higher vision, higher education, your personal philosophy, travel, anything that connects to mentors, gurus. So the deeper meaning, I think, of this is there is outdated ways of thinking, teaching, or communicating that have become preachy or maybe emotionally disconnected that are now being challenged. Now, you may feel a tension between your big picture vision, right, Sun, Jupiter in the 10th, and your day-to-day emotional reality. The theme here really is because Jupiter represents you, and it's also connecting to your philosophy, Sun, Jupiter, your travel, your beliefs, and what you believe in versus what you have learned, and that friction. So you guys have heard me say in the other videos, like, watch for getting into like the, philosophical debates, watch for issues with traveling, watch for issues with things connecting to legal matters or things connecting to documents or anything revolving around, conversations with professors, conversations with teachers, with gurus, even some drama that can be kind of coming up with siblings. Now, with that being said, this is really, I think, as a tip for you guys, is to really practice speaking and learning from both your head and your heart, and releasing these belief systems or communication styles that no longer feel emotionally true. A more integrated, inspiring message can be born from this process. Well, you've got Pluto, which rules the 12th house, and with Pluto retrograde conjunct the moon, if you're in a constant mindset of, it's going to fall apart, it's not working, I can't handle this, or you just hear that kind of negative naysaying that's kind of going on in your brain, then it's going to really disrupt the opportunity for you to really lean on that more optimistic, silver lining, bigger, better, grandiose, thing, that you typically kind of have because you're ruled by Jupiter. I think about having like a few Sag risings in my life. One of my really good friends is a Sag rising, and she was kind of telling me about how she's like, well, at the end of the month, I'm going on this trip. And I was like thinking to myself, like Sun, Jupiter, you're catching flights, not feelings, and how she's, been looking forward to this trip, but she's been dealing with so much anxiety, and she's been dealing with so much, some real emotional kind of like, mental issues. And she's been like dealing with depression and problems with her siblings. And she's like, I just feel like I'm going to be consumed by this the entire time I'm on this trip, and that I'm not going to be able to relax and enjoy myself. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what this looks like to me. But if you let that be all consuming, then you can't be present with the trip, the class, the teacher. You can't be positive, and you can't be open-minded. And so you have to watch for some of that negative thought patterning to get in. And you want to lean into the moon trining Uranus in the 7th house, where getting an astrology reading, talking to a therapist, having a partner who's like really supportive and receptive and can kind of show you maybe where you're kind of getting stuck in a rut and give you some feedback that will really shift your philosophy. That's what I would do personally. I think that's what's going to be the most helpful for you. And with the Sun and Jupiter trining Neptune, I really think that it's time for you to go and have some fun in the sun and have a little bit of like a breakaway and not constantly kind of be in this mindset. So keep an open mind and be willing to, I think, maybe shift how you think and what you have kind of believed in. But 3rd house full moons, moving, travels, vehicles, things that involve siblings, stuff connected to neighbors, and documents, legal documents with the trine to Uranus can also be a theme here as well. Card that you get is the King of Coins. Okay, so far so good. So this could be a Capricorn, a Taurus, or in some ways it could be a Virgo that's coming into your life. I wonder if some of you guys are going to be getting some career coaching. That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting with like the full moon trine. So if you're doing any continuing education, or if you're taking any certifications, if you're doing training, if you're working with a headhunter, if you're, maybe trying to finalize a website or anything connected to media, this would be wonderful. Because to me, it looks like your mind is on your money or it's on your business, which has absolutely nothing to do with this, but it may mean you're trying to find new ways of making money, or you're trying to find new ways of diversifying what you can offer people. So that way you feel like you can go and have fun and you can be away and you can do stuff and not always feel tied to, well, your work. I also think that this is due to the nature of the square to Chiron in your 6th, that it could be showing you where, you know, the grind is kind of wearing on you and you need a trip, or where there is some work-related issues or health-related issues that is also kind of impacting your mindset. But with that being said, I actually see you being very grounded and being very practical and matter-of-fact about this. But if there's any news that's connected to finances, any news connected to business, any negotiations, if there's any announcements that need to be made, it looks like you're doing it in a very mature way, and maybe even getting some support or some feedback from somebody in how to navigate some of this stuff that's going on. So hopefully that's helpful for you, Sag. And what should have been the luckiest day of the year looks like it's going to come with some kind of cosmic reckoning. And I would just say choose your words wisely, okay? All right, good luck. For my Capricorn and Capricorn risings, you guys are going to be doing the full moon in Aquarius in your natal 2nd house of money, resources, stability, and self-esteem. This is going to be opposing the Sun and Jupiter in your 8th house of intimacy, other people's resources, shared power, psychological themes, secrets, intimacy, and stuff getting exposed. Both for you in Cancer, these are very financial related full moons. And I think the deeper meaning here, when you kind of break it down, is that old survival patterns around money and value and emotional merging that have kind of kept you in control or maybe in scarcity are now being illuminated for you. This can bring up deep material, you know, around receiving. It's also about trusting. It's also about self-worth. Now, this is picking up the energy of Uranus, and it's trining Uranus. So there could be a pretty dramatic change in your resources because suddenly there's a pivot and you're working independently, or you pick up a second job, or you have something that you can kind of do that's very flexible. I could also see this be about your resources kind of shifting, and maybe you're kind of saying, hey, I'm actually, you know, deciding that I'm going to be putting money into learning a new skill, or I'm spending more money on health, or I'm spending more money on pets, because you have Uranus obviously in the 6th. Now that moon is connected to your 7th house of relationships, your opposite sign Cancer, and it's also conjunct Pluto. So it can be a lot about whether or not you release scarcity mindset in relationships, if you hold on to some people, if you let some people go. And obviously this is really highlighting this incoming North Node change in your 2nd house where, you know, she's going to work hard for the money. I'll just say that. And there's going to be a sense of wanting to produce more, wanting to accumulate more, maybe wanting to spend more. And some big money things can come up with this. And I would say, well, more money, more problems. But the trine to Uranus might mean that you're trying to find solutions or people who can kind of help you with money-related matters. This is opposing the Sun and Jupiter in your 8th house, where likely there's going to be some kind of abundance, or there's going to be resources, or maybe there's loans, or there's going to be bonuses, or, you know, returns or winnings that are going to come in from other people that dramatically changes the landscape of your resources. So what somebody else maybe gives to you, loans you, what money a partner, you know, accumulates might benefit you in some way. And really, I think that it's a time to get honest about where you've equated your worth with control or achievement. I would be practicing under this full moon, you know, small acts of receiving and vulnerability. I would get into the habit of saying, yes, thank you, I received that, you know, and knowing that you're worth it, you deserve it. And whether it's a tip, if it's a compliment, if it's going to be somebody who's wanting to support one of your ideas or your endeavors, I would say be open to it. And release old scarcity or control patterns that can really open the door to greater abundance and deeper intimacy overall. Now you're ruled by Saturn, and we are going to start seeing, as we're getting more into, you know, August, Sun and Jupiter are going to start trining Saturn. We're going to see the moon is sextiling Saturn. So a lot of the big financial, you know, decisions that are being made, or the big purchases or the spending, might be connected to property, family, real estate. And with Moon Pluto, it means that you're having to take other people into consideration about this. So it's like checking with your spouse before you buy a really expensive couch, right? Or before you go, like, you know, tapping into their credit card, or, you know, really discussing where it makes sense to be more conservative actually with spending. So that way you feel like you have more money to build towards your future home goals down the road. But yeah, big money stuff can definitely happen here. And I think it's going to be big breakthroughs, not just financially, but when it comes to your confidence and your self-esteem. All right, what can we tell my Capricorns and Cap risings? Somebody was going to get it. It's going to be you. You guys are having the Tower moment. So, man, we were on a roll. We almost made it. But that's okay. The tarot is going to tell us what it needs to tell us. And so you're the one who really needs to hear the message. Something's going to end. Something's going to be killed off. But something better is going to be kind of brought in its place. Of all of the 12 rising signs, I would have to say that I feel like you're probably the sign that needs to hear this the most. Okay, probably. I would say maybe you and Aquarius risings. But who knows? Maybe they'll get it too. We'll see. But this is with the North Node and Pluto and the Moon being in the second means you deserve wealth too. You deserve stability too. You deserve, to feel independent when it comes to your resources as well. And so what if I told you that this kind of quote unquote crisis, full moon conjunct Pluto in your second house isn't a crisis when it comes to your finances. It's your philosophy, your beliefs revolving around what you are worthy of and what you are worthy of receiving. So I need you guys to really be like, okay, I'm open to receiving, universe. I know you've got my back. Help me. With that being said, that Sun Jupiter going into the 8th house means, there may be an increase in limit. There may be a loan. There may be even because Jupiter rules the 3rd house, some dramatic change with a sibling or some kind of dramatic change that's going to happen with your partner's money can help you kind of break out of a spot where, traditionally you would deal with this by yourself. But the Sun and Jupiter is saying, I've got your back. We're going to kind of help you. But yeah, there's an oh shit moment coming. Whatever dramatic financial situation happens, it may feel a little uncomfortable and there's going to be some pressure in the moment, but it's going to lead to you learning how to be vulnerable with other people and saying, hey, can you support me? Can we do this together? Can we grow and can we build together? And likely what you'll find is that it's going to end up making you, I think, a lot stronger in the long run. So I kind of look at this as like if you're a small business owner and you're like, I'm having trouble making ends meet. Do I go and take somebody who's going to be an investor, right? Do I go and take on a partner? Do I go and take out the business loan? I mean, obviously be cautious and conservative because Jupiter can make some problems bigger, and be wary of how much debt you're taking on. But certain people may pop in or certain situations might actually help you come up with a solution. It's just whether or not you're willing to receive it. Capricorn, curious to see why you got that, so let me know. All right, Aquarius and Aquarius rising. Obviously, new moon, full moon in your sign, okay? So go back to the new moon that you had in February of this year where you guys were like hell on wheels. It was, in the late degrees of Aquarius. It was squaring Uranus that was in Taurus at the time. So there's a lot of storylines connected to family upheaval, moving, feeling kind of out of sorts, like a bit of a rolling stone and not really feeling satisfied with your family or your home situation. Thankfully, you don't have that in this one, okay? But that goes without being said. If you have anything like the first 6 degrees of Aquarius, sun, moon, or rising, this is very personal for you because the full moon's in your sign. So you got to think about what's been brewing over the last 6 months, and it's going to be conjunct Pluto, which is going to be the ruler of your 10th house of career, work, and reputation. So all eyes are on you, basically. Now, this will be opposing the Sun and Jupiter in your 7th house, your opposite sign of relationships, partnerships, anything connected to spouses, clients, your marketplace. And in the first house, when you have this full moon, the deeper meaning is really old versions of yourself, especially masks of detachment, intellectual superiority, rebelliousness, independence is now all being illuminated. And the tension is really between who I have, been, or who I belong with, right? Sun, Jupiter, versus who I truly am. So you may feel like you're one person in relationships and you see the value and the benefit, or you're appreciative of your partner or your business partner and things are looking really good on the outside, but you might feel like there is like a storm that's been kind of brewing internally. And Pluto connects to, like I said, your career and your status, while the moon connects to your health and your habits. So you might feel like you're going through a professional rebirth period, you're going through a physical rebirth period, There can be a lot of finally, after 6 months of shedding your old skin, now there is this grand reveal of how you look different, you feel different, and people are now starting to comment and recognize how much you have changed and transformed. Now, what's interesting is to see Juno and Pluto and the moon here means that there may be some situations where Aquarius risings feel married to their job, right? Moon, or they're married to their routine, or they're, dedicated to service. And that's in opposition to the sun and Jupiter in your 7th, where other people are like, hey, I see you're going through it. I'm there for you. Do you need me? Or, you're always working, or you're so focused on your health, or you're always working out. Like, I'm over here, I'm interested, like come and join me or partner with me, or I want to spend more time with you. Now, on one hand, it's interesting because this is going to sextile Uranus, your modern day ruler. The full moon is going to trine Uranus too. So I do think we'll see a lot of Aquarius or Aquarius risings that suddenly have this creative outburst. It could also mean that they're feeling a little bit more feminine, they're feeling a little bit more emotional. Some of you guys will be getting pregnant. That will definitely happen with a full moon, especially with the moon trining Uranus, your 5th house of children. And I think this is about allowing yourself to be seen, as a human, and including your emotions and your need for connection, which can sometimes be scary, and releasing any identity that requires you to stay detached, and going at this from the direction of being more heart-centered and maybe expressive version, so you can lead in relationships and also in community. Now, I have said that this would be challenging because it was in Aquarius, and that's obviously your sign. And Pluto can be the doom and gloom, where it's like, things are difficult. How am I going to get through this? This is really testing me. And I would say, look at the opposition of Sun and Jupiter. You're going to have a therapist. You're going to have a partner. You're going to have a friend. You're going to have a creative collaborator. You're going to have people who are going to be like, I'm rooting for you. I'm praying for you. I'm proud of you, who are doing everything they can to kind of help you through this pretty dramatic moment as you have this closing full moon tied to an eclipse in your sign. Lean into the trine to Uranus, get creative and find ways for creative breakthroughs, and let other people support you as you go through this process is what I would recommend. And the fact that it's going to be at a 6 definitely touches on health issues for Aquarius or Aquarius risings. You guys have just recently had a Mercury retrograde going through your 6. It'll be direct by then, but it can be the results of, where maybe your emotions are impacting your health, or your job is impacting your health in some way. All right, let's take a look. What can we tell Aquarius and Aquarius risings? You also get the Knight of Wands. Wow. Okay, I think that was was it Libra? But yeah, you're going to have the Knight of Wands. So it basically means that passion, you're going forward. Maybe you can be a little emotionally intense, obviously with Moon and Pluto there could be this emotional purge that's going on. But I also think that it's picking up that sextile to Neptune in a fire sign, right? Knight of Wands, fire. So you're feeling like, I got to get the show on the road. I have to write, I have to create, I have to share something. I have to tell my story. And Aries and Sagittarius and Leo might be part of it. And I would say probably part of this is just there is this restlessness about you with the North Node in your sign now, where you're like, I just want to do things my way. And it's easier to be alone, or it's like easier to, focus on myself. While now the South Node, the Sun and Jupiter are moving through your 7th, where it's not that you can't have relationships, because that opportunity is there with Jupiter, but you may feel like it's hard for you to have some of the changes in your life that you need while simultaneously building relationships and partnerships. So it's like a little paradoxical with the nodes and the aspects with the planets. There is space for you to have independence and still expand and find joy with other people. And I would say don't rush the process, and definitely pay close attention to where there can be things that are developing rapidly when it comes to just your identity, the Knight of Wands. And I think you're going to have a creative breakthrough. I think that's going to be part of it as well. Travel, being on the move, is pretty common when you have the moon moving through your 1st house also. So Aquarius, I want to hear what's going to happen and what major dramatic changes have happened for you over the last 6 months, because this is like the finale. All right, Pisces and Pisces risings, you get a little bit more of a serene full moon, although it is intense. It's less intense for you guys because that full moon in Aquarius will be in your 12th house of the subconscious, what's hidden behind the scenes. and spiritual matters. And you're going to see that full moon is going to be opposing the Sun and Jupiter in your natal 6th house, which is connected to that expansion that's taking place with your daily work and service. Maybe there's a new job, there's a new health routine, there's a new pet. Very personal for you because you're Jupiter traditionally. And we're seeing this access on, the 6th and the 12th, which deals with the mind, body, spirit balance. Now, for you guys, what you're probably going to find is that the deeper meaning is that there's hidden patterns, maybe unconscious sacrifices or ways of escaping through overservice or through fantasy are now being brought into light, and your inner world is demanding your attention. And it may come through a dream, your subconscious, your sleep, and obviously, how to better show up in your life and be of service and do it in healthier, happier ways. Now, the Sun and Jupiter is tying in the energy of you being of service, and the moon is connecting to children, creativity, self-expression, while Pluto's picking up the energy of the 9th house, where there's some pretty dramatic shifts where, your intuition's strong, your dreams are going to be very vivid. And usually we need a little bit of time to rest and recuperate and kind of like keep to ourselves when we have a full moon in the 12th house. Although it's generally, we kind of feel out of our mind, or we feel a little crazed, or we feel a little bit more like, ooh, something's brewing or something is coming. I would encourage you guys during this particular aspect to actually lean into the sextile with Neptune, because it means that you're restructuring something about your values, your beliefs, and your financial situation. And also the positivity of the Sun conjunct Jupiter, which is, if I can be of service, if I can be healthy, if I can have routines, then I'm not going to get so rocked by whatever is kind of happening out in the world. This means that on the time of the full moon, you actually have to prioritize rest. Dream work is incorporated. There is going to be a little bit more quiet time, and this is a wonderful time to release any hidden guilt, and patterns that are connected to self-sacrifice. Likely what you'll find is that the clarity comes from your subconscious, and it can kind of help you in a way restructure your daily life and also service in a way that actually nourishes you rather than leaving you feel spent. Now, what's interesting is this is the last full moon before next month. At the end of August, we will have a full moon lunar eclipse in Pisces, which will oppose the Sun, obviously, in Virgo. It will square Uranus in Gemini. So enjoy the peace while you have it. Maybe you know that there's big change on the horizon coming with your living situation, your relationships, your home. Maybe you are reflecting on that before you embark on some of these bigger changes that are going to be kind of coming up. And I really think for a lot of you guys, that trine to Uranus is saying it's definitely on the horizon. If you have not already done it, you may have a breakthrough or a dream or something that you see symbolically that's like telling you which way you're supposed to go. If you go left or you go right, if you move or if you stay, and what city you're going to pick, or how that's going to be impacting your home, and also, well, potentially even your job. So let's ask the tarot how this is going to be impacting my Pisces and Pisces risings. I could see some of you guys traveling for work too. I guess that could be one way of looking at it. Going to foreign countries and traveling for sure. The card that we get is, wow, the Ace of Cups again. So a new relationship, but I think it's in the ethers, and I think like what I was saying, I could see, because we're going to have the Pisces eclipse next month oppose the Sun in square Uranus, that there's about to be some new relationship changes on the horizon. And maybe that's just a new way of reflecting and kind of connecting yourself. Maybe you're feeling like there is some karmic patterns in relationships that are kind of coming to an end. Certainly, I think you've had a lot of that with Mercury retrograde in your 5th house recently, where there's been a lot of reevaluating that. But also that this could be like karmic soulmates coming in, that this could be a connection with somebody where it's out of this world or it's otherworldly, which is very bizarre because the 5th house is more about, completions, culminations. That 12th house is saying, okay, we got to wrap all of this up before we get on to the next thing, which will be you in opposition to relationships. Get down and dirty with your alone time. And what I mean by that is do something with it. Really do a lot of psychological reevaluation, do a lot of meditation, do a lot of soul searching before you make these bigger decisions next month, because likely it sounds like it's going to impact your relationships in quite a big way. ask the universe for signs or for symbols, ask ancestors to intervene and kind of direct you so you know which way you're supposed to be going. Crazy. Got a couple cards 2 times. So maybe there will be relationship stuff for some people. I don't know. Certainly Leo is romance, right? And the dramatic blowback maybe that we have from, you know, our social platforms or friends, whatever, because of that. But basically that was the full moon in Aquarius. I just want to keep reminding you guys, similar to the Pluto-Jupiter opposition, this full moon is not punishment. Okay, by any means. It means that it's here to illuminate what has actually already served its purpose. So something more alive, more joyful, more aligned with our true selves can start to take root. So like I said, something old has to die off. So new joy, new leadership, creativity, and love can actually be born. I don't know about you, but I would definitely think now is the time to get with the show so we don't have to do this down the road in 2 years under an eclipse when it's going to have even much more difficult aspects. This is that foundation moment, and I would say trust the thunderstorm, trust the clearing. And thank you guys so much for being here with me today. If you guys found that this resonated with you and it was helpful, give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to like and share and hype this video. Consider sharing it on your socials. And also don't forget to comment and subscribe. I want to hear everything going on with you guys this week. All the content is about this kind of Jupiter-Pluto opposition. Where can we see the positivity? Where can we see the silver lining? How can we really shine a light in things and support people in the comments and in the community to see some of this dramatic change as something that's actually really, really good? Now, I hope you guys join me here tomorrow. I'm going to be live at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. That's 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm doing live tarot readings. I will also be doing readings for this full moon. You guys can catch that in about another week. So definitely come and ask questions about that during my live. And look for the link that we're going to post in the community tab on my YouTube channel so you can go and sign up and get a reading in advance. If you guys want to learn more about me, or you want to take astrology classes, or maybe you want to get a personal reading with me, maybe you're looking to get a transit calendar so you can see all these transits in advance in your phone, click the links below and head over to my website at beyondtheveiltarot.com. There it's going to prompt you to sign up for my newsletter. I highly recommend doing that. I am working on all kinds of webinars right now. I'm putting together stuff on the up and coming eclipses. I'm putting together stuff on the up and coming transits that are going to be happening later this year, like the Venus retrograde in Scorpio, the Mars retrograde in Leo, and also 2027 prediction reports for the 12 rising signs. So if you guys want to see that stuff, if you want to see when that stuff becomes available or when I have offers, please sign up for my newsletter and stay connected with me. So with that being said, we got some time before this settles in. Mark your calendars for obviously the 29th of July, but keep your eyes open from the 18th on to see the rumbles. Until next time, I'll see all of you guys very soon. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Take care.